All right, I'm not gonna lie. I had a delay there because I had to make sure that I knew what episode it was. I also can tell my mic volume is too high, so let me turn that down really quickly. There we go. Am I not that loud? Okay, cool. I think so. I put it on 0.78 delay. Delay Andy. Already like what? What happened already? How's it going, everybody? This is episode 98. All right. I had to double check again just to make sure. Good to see you guys again. It's been only a week since we've last talked, and I tried to make sure to follow up with you guys again for the weekly podcast. Sorry about the time today. You guys know how it is. I did want to talk about a couple of things today. I don't have necessarily a whole lot of set in stone things that I wanted to get to, but I do want to actually cover the most recent death of a game, Crucible. And I'm going to open up the video now because I'm actually curious what ended up being the top comments on the video. And maybe we can chat about my thoughts on Crucible, covering the game, and just the game as a whole. I think that Crucible, for me, was probably it's weird. I'm not gonna lie. When you go into certain videos, you think to yourself, well, I can kind of see how this is gonna play out a little bit, right? In certain respects. And with regards to Anarchy Online, I definitely went in thinking I knew part of the story and came out being like, whoa, there's like so much going on here. But it wasn't really seen as a failure, you know, like, don't get me wrong, like Anarchy Online at launch definitely was a failure, but 2-3 years later and it was already one of the best MMOs in the world. So obviously hindsight 2020 and the game is older and didn't quite have the impact that other games had, like publicly in the general public, but historically had a lot of impact. We'll get to Anarchy though. Crucible was different because it's a project where it's so clear that the game's not going to do well, and quite possibly one of the most shrouded in mystery that I've ever covered. So, like, you know, the series has this whole theme of mystery, right? And to me, that's a big part of it. Is like, what is the, you know, what are the clues? What's the evidence behind why something fails? And Crucible, it's. Have you guys ever heard of a high-profile launch not even having like playable betas, open betas, and really any kind of like coverage or marketing all the way up to its launch, except for like 2 weeks before with one video, YouTube video? Like, seriously, like, what other high profile game has ever done a launch like that? Like, if you've seen my Crucible video, that's exactly what they did. They had a first look, and the first look was literally the first time you had looked at the game. So when they called it first look, they were being serious. Like, they were not kidding. They were being serious. Well, that's part of the problem, Ashley, is it definitely was high profile in the sense that it was their first commercial launch for AGS, Amazon Game Studios, their second actual game, because Breakaway failed so quickly that it wasn't even considered really a game and nobody really considered it a failure. But AGS's first commercial failure was Crucible. So for me, Amazon launching a game with no buzz means that it was deliberate. Like, there's no possible way you can convince me otherwise. There's just no way. Like I just can't even, like, my brain, like, I can't think what would be the other reason to literally give people a first look a couple of weeks before the game came out and not even really let them play it and expect them to pay full price on it. It's just like, yeah, there was so, like, that was so weird to me, and it gave me such a weird feeling. I think it was setting off my my spider sense, or like my detective, you know, tingle. I don't know where your tingle is. Mine's in a very appropriate region, I should say. But my tingle was going off, and I was definitely thinking, like, yeah, this has cover up written all over it. Sorry. It's just something very different about it, you know? Like, when have you seen a game die like that? You know, like, you just don't. It's Crucible's just definitely one of the fastest failing titles in the series. Well, Auto Assault was because it never really launched. I guess the ones that don't launch are the fastest. Which, speaking of which, this is a bit of a tangent. We're gonna get back to Crucible, but I get this comment on my videos, and OnlyFans, here we come with that tingle. Cut their losses, try to profit as much possible off of a failed project. They were sure because of the publisher name, I think. Nerdcast only filled with MS tangents. That would just go endlessly, though. I should have a podcast where, yeah, maybe in the future when I have like oodles of money, or how about just like more livable money, I could do a podcast where if somebody donates like to start off, it'd be $5. Then I have to keep going, and I have to find more things to rant about, and y'all have to make me rant about more things. And oh god. I feel like I would fear for my health. Like, that's why I would never do that. when you know that you're bad at ranting, I know that like people would just keep being like, okay, this will be funny. For $5, I would do this. It's right up there with Google Stadia. Isn't that just this podcast? I wish it could be more like that, Alundrus. I do try to cover some things occasionally. But man, news has been so peculiar regarding video games lately. I do have video games to talk about in terms of like actually out and playable right now. In fact, I'm going to talk about Call of Duty, as you see in the title. My favorite Call of Duty in like since Modern Warfare 1 came out. So I can't even remember when that was. So like I'm really enjoying the most recent Call of Duty, which I know is funny because there's a very interesting split on that, but we'll talk about that more later. So to go back to Crucible, and the tangent that I was going to go on before I went on this tangent, which was actually about, well, this has happened with Crucible, but it's happened with pretty much every death of a game I've ever covered. I always get the same comment. And the same comment is, this failed so badly, isn't this considered like a stillborn? Or why is this featured on the series if it like died so quickly? And I'm just like, okay, literally, guys, in the description, that's part of the criteria, is if it never launches. So like, if you think you're being really clever out there, I'm just saying, I gotta put you under fire by posting that comment over and over again. Now people are gonna do it just for the memes, which is totally fine. I'm okay with being memed, but before, people were doing it because they thought they were the fucking smartest person in the world, all right? And that's literally in the description. So like, if a game doesn't launch, it's actually made for this series. That's kind of the purpose of it. Anyway, that was just like one little thing today that was like, you know, grinding my gears, as Peter says in Family Guy, right? Like no, like I wouldn't not feature it on the series if it failed so quickly. In fact, that's why I would feature it on the series, is because it failed so quickly. If anything, those are like slam dunk videos. Like the Crucible video for me was not as challenging to make as the Anarchy Online video. The Anarchy Online video was very, very challenging. Was that you, Limpos? Did I catch you? Oh no, quick someone throw money at him with a controversial topic. That's the thing, is like people could just talk to me about controversial topics and I'd talk about them. I'm pretty bad when it comes to like selling myself for money. I can sell a product, and I could definitely sell myself in regards to my passion, but selling myself for a profit, yeah, I've never really been as much into that. I think it's pretty easy. I mean, I've literally always said I'm open to literally any kind of conversation. It's just that people tend to trend more towards gaming, I think, because their lives are very stressed, you know? So when you have a stressed life, like, makes sense to me why you wouldn't want to be surrounded by stress like everywhere, you know? How I feel about the election being stolen from Trump. Oh no, they're going to recount the votes in the states that he's lost in larger margins than the 1% voter fraud accused of. How to get... No, don't do it, Alondris. That's the one thing you cannot mention. Okay. That's the one thing you can't mention. Don't mention ES. No, don't mention Black Desert either. I'm just kidding. I feel like I just repeat my rants in those. Like, I have certain rants that I feel like all of us as nerds have a thing that we get triggered on, you know? And I definitely feel like in MMOs, I have those certain things where I'm just like, I go down the same damn like path, like, and I'm just like, no, get out of there, damn it. It's probably the on the spectrum part of me. It's kind of weird. The fact that you could talk about whatever. Yeah, it is kind of weird to talk about whatever, I would say. Last podcast, we talked about really whatever. Like, we went like everywhere. There are no MMOs. There is no MMO, only pixels. Fair enough. I nearly applied for a job for game manager for Black Desert. Then I realized I couldn't work for such evil. It's funny because Black Desert is one of those games where, like, the MMO industry in general is so interesting to me because, like, what I find the most interesting about it is it's kind of like, I think of it as like the bush leagues in like another like sport. Like, you guys know how they play soccer pretty much everywhere in the world, but obviously not everywhere is as good as everywhere. So like, if we go to like the top 100 ranked team or like the rank 96 team or some shit like that, sorry, bush league is like an American term for sure. Bush league means what's the easiest way to describe bush league, guys? Just like early skill league, the noob league, I guess. Maybe kind of amateur, but maybe slightly above amateur. So maybe almost like a in baseball they have a pro league, and then they have kind of like the semi-pro league. Like, I forgot what they call it. Bronze league, junior league, try hard league. All right, these are some good names. I like these. I don't think they're relevant, but I like them. Or organized amateur. Okay, lots of. So the one that is still sort of professional, but there is an actual. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it for sure. I guess I think of MMOs right now like the industry as almost like the bush leagues, meaning like as soon as like a big player comes in and has like a solidified game design and their game's actually able to have the good enough performance to run at whatever they're trying to accomplish with it, I really truly mean this. I think it'll look so abundantly above everything else. Like, it's going to be so eye-opening whenever it comes out. And I know this sounds very ominous, but it's just like, that's kind of like my feelings of the industry, is that people have a very justifiably pessimistic perspective of it because it takes forever to make these games, and there's so much other, you know, things going into the picture. Like, for example, the time, the difficulty. Let's talk about the difficulty as well, right? But there are a lot of factors that go into making an MMO, and Crucible was interesting to cover, but at the end of the day, honestly, that's like a slam dunk for me personally, just because it's a very formulaic hero shooter style MOBA game, and I've already covered a couple of those. So this is not like my area of expertise per se. I think MMOs that's kind of mainly it, and maybe multiplayer shooters, because like I like those things the most. But the reason why Crucible was easy for me was because I had already covered Battleborn. I already covered Dirty Bomb. I already covered Gotham City Imposters. I already covered what else did I cover? Lawbreakers. I already covered Lawbreakers, you know? So I had already covered these kind of hero shooter style multiplayer games that were more recent, and kind of saw the problems that they had. And to sum up my thoughts on Crucible, because I actually don't have much more to say on it, because I think it was kind of very simple to explain, was that it was essentially a game that looked like it existed in a time, like a hyperbolic time chamber or some shit. Like, they went back in time or just stayed in a static like time, like 1999 or, you know, like 2008 or whatever it was, like whatever year. I'm not honestly memeing. I don't really know what year I would pick. I haven't thought about it enough, but they like froze themselves in time and then just like didn't exist in the market. That's what the game feels like. And it's so weird because this is coming from like one of the most information rich companies, like, or parent companies at least, like Amazon Game Studios, parent company Amazon. Like, it's like, I really do not understand how Crucible came out making so many of the same exact mistakes. Like, really, just watch that video and then go watch the other videos I mentioned: Lawbreakers, Dirty Bomb, Battleborn, etc. And you'll be like, wait, or even Shadowrun. Like, these have so many of the same exact mistakes. It's just, yeah, it's that is one of those things where I think there's a difference between liking a style of game and understanding what that style of game entails. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, I like RTS games, and I like I would say, what's another good genre for me to pick? Action games. But they're not really like my genre of even main focus. Not like, throw expertise out of there, even just like moderate focus. So meaning I can enjoy those things for what they are and respect them for what they are. But like, I know when I talk about action games, I haven't played all of the main ones that everybody's played, you know, the Ghost of Shurima, the Sekiro, the all the Dark Souls games, and you know what I'm saying? Like, so I wouldn't talk about action games like the genre is a genre that I would understand, or a genre that I would feel comfortable designing my game around. But it almost feels like Crucible was designed by somebody who didn't even play hero shooters or MOBAs. Like, I'm sorry. Just meaning, like, I'm sure somebody on the staff had played them. I'm not trying to make that claim. I'm just saying, like, whoever was like behind the key design, does it kind of feel like they haven't really... Well, I've played Dark Souls a little bit. Sashimi? My bad. You guys are trolling me now. You haven't played all the Dark Souls games? Yeah, no, I haven't. I actually think they're controversially boring for me. You know, I've talked about it before. It's one of my controversial opinions, I guess. Seems to be questionably common amongst game devs, like they never learn anything from other games. You know, it kind of launches me into my next point, and since we're now going to cover my Anarchy Online video that I did, just my thoughts on it and some whatever comes to mind, basically, I want to segue into another point that I was going to make, which was actually about MMOs. And I actually mentioned this like in my title today. In my title, I wrote my ultimate MMO advice. And this is not like advice for like a player or anything like that. This is just advice like in general to a MMO developer. You know, my advice to them, very general advice, would be play these damn games, okay? I mean, really play them. The old ones and the new ones. Like, actually play the games, because if there's one thing that's abundantly clear when you look at like MMO design, especially of late, a lot of the time it comes across like the people who design these don't even play the games. And I think it's like a very, very problematic thing, where if you're not willing to slog through the slog that you've created to replace content, for example, then it shows that there's a problem there, right? Like, that's kind of how I see it. And to me, a good example of this is like, you know, Final Fantasy XIV might have its flaws and isn't my favorite game, but the developers of the game actually play the game. And that to me is so clear to see that they actually play the game. Like, they're familiar with the game. Like, it sounds so silly to say this, but like, I've had a conversation with a AAA or former AAA developer who now works for, I would argue, is probably a AA, almost AAA company. One of the most famous MMO companies out there. Like, when I talked to him about this subject, I was getting this from even some of the biggest MMO projects you guys can think of. Like, meaning that some of the top talent, executives, people making decisions, were people who had little to no experience even playing MMOs, period. Some even video games back then, which is like more egregious, but like even more recently, was just like MMOs, period. And so I think my biggest advice to the MMO industry generally is really just play these games. Because I think if you actually play them as you start to design, you'll start to actually uncover more of what goes into making the sauce, if you will. Because my point segueing into this is actually from my Crucible point. If you don't know how the sauce tastes, it's going to be so clear. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like, to use a stupid food analogy, if you actually made sauce for somebody and you put it on their food and you see them eat it for the first time and you haven't had the sauce yet, anybody ever do that? Like, I don't know about you, but I always try my shit first. Like, I have to know if my food's okay. I'm not going to serve it to somebody without knowing how it tastes, right? And I'm not going to be like, I'm going to make Indian food when I don't even know how to make any kind of Indian food. And then I'm definitely not going to serve it to somebody without tasting it myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, my food analogies, bear with me, but regarding video games, like, the same thing applies for me. Is like, I'm not going to show somebody my game unless I played it a significant amount of time, because I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. And I definitely wouldn't want people trying to design a game based on a flavor, right? To bring it back to my food analogy, having not even had the flavor yet or tasted it, you know? I fear if developers were actually to play MMOs, they'd just quit and go make good games instead. That's funny. That's a really good point, though. Pin Zero is like, imagine working in a certain software or with a certain software, like Oracle software, like whatever. Like, you're working with some kind of like interfacing software and having no experience actually using the software. Like, how about this? I used to work in construction for a while, and I worked with a program called On-Screen Takeoff. Also, another program called Bluebeam. These are two overlaying, kind of layering slash plan document markup. They're a lot more complicated than that, but basically that's what they are, programs. And so people use them to bid on construction. And so I had to actually learn how to use this software in order to properly know how the buildings are structured. And so in a way, I learned what buildings worked like without ever having to even set foot into these buildings. But guess what I learned ultimately? No matter how good I got at reading plans or operating software, that no matter what, if I wanted to be good, I actually had to go and look at a job, right? So like, when I was first just doing mock-ups, I didn't have to go to a job. But then once I started to actually have to be on a job site, you start to actually put things together much better. Like, you start to see, oh, on the plans, like, it shows a 19-foot ceiling here. And I can't comprehend maybe at that time what 19-foot looks like. So I'm like, is that like right here? Like, you don't really know necessarily. And so whenever you actually go and see it, you're like, wow, that's actually a pretty high ceiling. Like, there's plenty of room here, you know, like, so that we won't have a problem doing blah, 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 right? So that's my construction analogy from a place of, you know, perspective. And, you know, I worked professionally as an estimator, cost estimator, project manager, and have ran and done multiple large projects. I mean, the largest project I've worked on was 1 million square foot. And that was like a massive hospital in the medical center in Houston, which is why my construction career is worked on so many big projects, is because I'm from probably the biggest construction place in the country. I mean, I think last time we checked, we're the biggest construction place. We're the biggest construction state. And Houston specifically has the biggest medical center in the world. So all of those are contributing factors to why I worked on so many big projects, right? And the other way was that I had a small trade. So meaning that I wasn't competing with like steel companies, you know, like, because you guys, if I worked for a steel company as a PM, like, you guys should never give me a dime, because those guys make insane money. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the people who are PMs for like the top trades, they make ass loads of money. I was a PM for what we call a sub of a sub, which means that I was low on the totem pole. Reminder to self, don't get injured in Houston. The hospital might collapse. Yeah, no, don't start a fire. That's more what my job was. Also, what if you choose a subgenre no one makes games of? Well, then you're opening yourself up to making mistakes. You've seen on-screen takeoff? That's hilarious, Limpos. I didn't know if it was more of a European thing or what, but Bluebeam is kind of taking over now in America, in my opinion. Like, I had to learn it at my last like corporate company, but on-screen is a lot more generic, I would say. Bluebeam has way higher capability and isn't as like formulaic and old as shit. Can't even be an arsonist these days. I know. Like, if you try to start a fire, I can guarantee that my fire stop worked. All right. So don't stay there because it doesn't actually stop the fire. It just contains the smoke, which is usually what kills. All right, so Anarchy Online. Let's talk about Anarchy Online. Oh wait, one last thing on my PSA. Play these damn games out there. If you're trying to make them, stop trying to make MMOs, or even at this point, MMORPGs are their own genre, in my opinion. And so, even then, like if you want to make a game that looks like Final Fantasy XIV, actually play Final Fantasy XIV. Don't just like look at it and think, we'll do something kind of like this, right? Because like, speaking of Anthem, by the way, which is the next death of a game, if you guys haven't heard or seen the news, I've already completed the script and the voiceover for it, and it's probably going to come out next week sometime, or maybe even the end of this week. But Anthem is one of those kind of games where it's just like, man, there's aspects of it where you think, were they trying to make a Final Fantasy XIV Mass Effect online game, like an RPG, like an MMORPG, and just didn't know how to do it, and accidentally made a looter shooter because they used Frostbite? Or like, what really was the intention? And that's kind of one of my theories, actually, is that I postulate, if you will, that I think they wanted to make a SWTOR Final Fantasy XIV kind of story game online. I mean, look at Fort Tarsis, look at the way like the hub works, the way that they spaced out the missions. It's almost like even organized just like Phantasy Star, and which is like super weird to think about because that game is super ancient, right? But it's like one of the four or founding fathers of that genre, in my opinion. The multiplayer online RPG genre was founded largely by games like Phantasy Star. So why does Anthem look like Phantasy Star, like by design, in so many ways? And I think it's because I think it was trying to be one, you know? Vindictus as well, good example, Pin Zero. One of my other favorite Asian games as well. But yeah, like I think it was actually trying to be like these games, and it just didn't know what those games were. Maybe didn't have the experience of playing those games, or as you will see in the video, it had a litany of other issues to deal with. Let me guess, the devs didn't play the biggest looters. Well, it shows in the game. If you've ever seen it or played it, DA, loot is probably the biggest problem, not gameplay related. Well, it is gameplay related, but you know what I mean. Like not like combat and performance and all that kind of issue related in Anthem, in my opinion. It's probably the loot. Like I think the loot is even worse than the story because I didn't expect the story to even be good. I don't think after we kind of realized what kind of game it was, most of us did necessarily. Like I know a lot of BioWare fans did, of course, like initially especially. But looking back, there's a lot of clues that they weren't trying to make a story game. And so it's funny when you go back and you look at things again and you kind of realize, like some of the signs were there, and while hindsight can make things seem 2020 clear and envision, sometimes you do kind of ignore things when they're right in front of you. And I think that Anthem had a lot of clues early on that it wasn't really going to be story focused. And I think that the fact that it still ends up playing like a game that's trying to be, in some ways, I think is where the problems lie, basically. They should have just either committed to just being a looter shooter, in my opinion, and actually like learned from the genre, like the games that they were trying to say that they weren't. Hint, hint, starts with a D. The D comes later. Has Anthem ever gotten the massive update it was promised? Not, definitely not. Last time I checked, they had Christmas decorations up in the middle of April. Yeah, somebody told me that as well. In fact, somebody even sent me a screenshot of that. Crucible was one of those stories where I saw it beforehand so clearly, but Anthem, I'm not going to lie, I didn't really see it coming because I wasn't really following it as much. Because once I heard it wasn't maybe going to have things like romances, it's like that's a thing that was in hindsight I should have realized was a bigger clue. It's actually to use an example of what I was just talking about. It was when they announced that there wasn't any romances. I should have seen that coming. I should have seen that as like, uh-oh, what does this mean here? Because like for many people, romances seem like such an inconsequential thing, especially story-wise. But I really challenge you guys to go look back at the oldest BioWare title that has romances in it and the newest. And what you'll find is that the vast majority of their games have romances. So meaning like this was literally an unprecedented thing for them to not have romances in their game, which to me, in hindsight now, especially, is only seen as a negative. Even their first RPG had it. You know, like, that's kind of crazy to think about. Even their first efforts at it had romance in it. So it's, in hindsight, I think I would have, going back in time, I would have been like, wait, guys, this is a big red flag, you know? But obviously, sometimes we hear things like that and we're just like, oh, but it's BioWare. They'll still have a good story. And I don't need to kiss and love every character I play in a game or whatever. You know, I play around in a game. Anthem felt like Destiny, but with bugs and no support from the devs. Anthem did sell like relatively well though, which I think is quite surprising and probably the only reason why we're still talking about it as a not foregone conclusion. Had they not sold rather well, they would have got shuttered like immediately, in my opinion. Like, I think that pretty strongly. Like, I think those sorts of big publishers, like, as long as there's some kind of evidence that there's money to be made, they'll try. They will try. Like, I know they have a bad rep of like shutting games down, Electronic Arts for example, and specifically, and companies. But like, if the game makes money, they'll try to like redo it. It's just a matter of how much are they actually trying, and that's where I am very, very dubious with Anthem's future. It's just they have 30 developers working on the game right now, and they're working on a Mass Effect game behind the scenes, a Dragon Age game behind the scenes, and who knows what else. And so, SWTOR, and then one or two other games I'm sure they're still running like multiplayer servers for. But like, are you really trying to convince me that Anthem is moving at good pace at this point? Because like, think about the last time that they even like asked and rather announced that they were going to do this update. At this point, it's almost like a year ago. And there's been like 2 baby updates since then. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, at what point do people fall for the trickle? And like, that's a bit of my issue is like, and this is actually a big issue with politics in general, actually, is like people take things so literally that unless they see the knife literally stabbed into the culprit, or rather the victim, the culprit stabbing the victim, they won't believe it's a murder. In video game development and video game coverage, it works the same way sometimes. It's like, I have to explain to people why things that are very dubiously labeled and designed for the player interaction is done that way intentionally to kind of mislead them and make them want to purchase things is actually like a way to make money off of them, which if handled incorrectly, or maybe even if handled in a more insidious way, could be seen as like a very negative thing, right? Like maybe even some form of people talk about pay to win, or, you know, whatever adjective you want to use, depending on how bad you think it is. Like that sort of stuff, having to explain that to people, because they literally just don't, if they don't see a company reaching into their like wallet and pulling out their money, they don't see it as them kind of being misled, you know? And I think part of that comes from an over obsession with like personal agency, thinking you have so much choice in your life. Personally, I think that's where that comes from, is thinking like, well, you know, you can just make the decision for yourself if you don't like this game or you don't like, or if it's like addicting or not. And it's like, if only that's how psychology worked, but it's not. And people get misled all the time. So that's why like someone like me has to combat that kind of shit, even if it makes me end up being an enemy for some reason, in some of the consumers' eyes. And usually only the most loyal consumers will see me that way because they see me as attacking their game, when in reality I'm attacking what it represents. You know, I can't really think of a game that I would attack. You know, like why would I attack a game just for being a game? You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess a game that's just like offensive for the sake of being offensive. Like I don't really know. Like what game would I just like hate just for being a game? Like I don't know. Maybe like a really bad game, I could hate it just from like a distaste in it, right? I guess I can't really understand otherwise. Hey, how's it going, Dayusha? Attack Witcher games that gets people going. Yeah, I don't know. It's good examples of this are just like things like whenever I discuss anything pay to win. It's so weird seeing people get like go through like the loopholes and the mental gymnastics to try to describe what they're doing as not the literal definition of what pay to win is, which is just like, I'm not saying that you are a bad person because you use pay to win. I'm saying that you are basically knowingly or unknowingly supporting business practices that don't have your best interest in mind. So you can take that however you choose to, and obviously people take a lot of offense to it, which I think speaks more about them than it does about me, which is sort of my point is like, I'm trying to help you guys. I'm trying to say, hey, developers and publishers, don't do this shit so we can have maybe more of a fair, with quotations because fairness is subjective, a fair model. And my thing is ultimately this. You might think I'm against pay to win or microtransactions, and if you know me, you know that that's actually couldn't be further from the truth. I actually fully support them. I mean, I've been partaking in them since I can even remember, and I've supported them even since back I've been playing Japanese and Korean online games since, you know, early 2000s. So then what is my point about them? Like, why do I seem like against them in certain respects? It's because of them misleading people. That's more of my issue. Is it's one thing to say this is what you're getting yourself into. For example, Star Trek Online is very abundantly that, and yet people still act like it's not that, which is still bizarre. That's more of an American thing, by the way. But Star Trek Online literally has said on record, if people don't buy our loot boxes and shit, we would fold. So like, I just appreciate the honesty there. Like, hey, we need to like have this kind of money-making thing going. Otherwise, we're just not really going to function. Now, whether or not you agree with that, that's up to you. I'm not saying you have to agree with it to keep Star Trek Online alive. Maybe you don't like Star Trek Online, so you're like, well, a game like that shouldn't exist based on the merit of its art. So let's just let it die. Don't buy these damn loot boxes. But some people want to keep the game alive. You see what I'm saying? And so as long as, like, to me, as long as they admit that up front, I don't have an issue with it. My issue is like a lot of, especially Korean companies, when they come over to America, it's a bit of the deception. It's knowing your game isn't an MMO, but knowingly advertising it as that anyway. It's knowing that something has a certain percentage chance of it dropping or not, and not telling people that, right? Like it's things like that you can fix. It's things like that you could actually do something about. Like very clear things, like showing you what the odds are on certain things, explaining more clearly to you what breaking down items are, and the whole salvage systems if you have things like that, how that's basically gambling. Like, if these things are more adequately explained, I actually don't have a problem with them morally. I'm very much that way, and like I think actually Card and I have a very similar opinion on this, which is kind of like, as long as you're upfront and you say like, this is what you're buying, here's the chances, I don't have an issue with having these things involved, actually. I don't. In fact, I would even partake in them myself. But I think it's because you're aware of what's going on. You get what I'm saying? And I don't like when a developer or a publisher treats me like I'm an idiot, you know? And then tries to steal the money from my wallet versus like, just negotiate with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, negotiate. Here's some content. Pay for it. Cool. I know that content isn't free, especially like now working in game development. This shit is expensive. Like, and working with projects now, I see like the amount of money that goes into this. Like even just like a computer station alone, is like thousands of dollars. Like I know that it's like a lot of money involved. And so it's like, but it's just exactly Pin Zero. It's like when they try to tell you the game is completely free to play. There's no advantage to be gained from paying. And it's just like, you don't have to lie. You can just say there is advantages, but they're very minuscule, or here's what they are very transparently. I think you'll find that people would actually be more okay with that. But this whole deception thing, that's where I take issue. And then it's like whenever I try to call it out, I get in the crossfire of the fans, basically, because they're like, oh, you just don't like this game. And it's like, no, I just don't like the way Kakao Games does things, for example. I love Korean culture. I'm literally learning Korean. Like, I've been learning Korean. Like, I love the language, and I've loved the culture. I did Taekwondo growing up for, like, 8 years. I love Koreans. It has nothing to do... Like, people paint this narrative like, you hate Korean MMOs. You hate Asians or something. It's like, no, I don't like when Kakao Games or developers like that come over and basically say, hey, camouflage isn't that big of an advantage in Black Desert Online. It's not pay to win. Really? Not seeing somebody's nameplate isn't an advantage? Really? So that's why you guys added it as a perk to buy when you get the costume? Come on. Really? There's no advantage to be had from wearing a costume, so they can't see your name. They know that. They're not stupid. They're well aware of what it is, but it's just the whole, like, treating you like you're stupid to where you don't know that yourself, And sure, I guess some people do get fooled by it, but that's what I'm trying to do is, like, let people know how the sausage gets made, basically. Because, have you guys ever seen that Snoop Dogg video where he learns how the sausage is made? All right, this shit is funny. It's hot dogs, my bad. I said sausages.
Let me see what they making right here. Oh, that's cereal. That's cream of wheat. Wait a minute, maybe sheep hair. Ugh, what is that? Boo-boo? Flour, cookie dough, manure, chocolate. That look like a malt.
I won't keep going to gross you guys out, but you get the point. For those who, can't see it, look up How's It Made with Snoop Dogg. That's the one where he looks up how hot dogs are made, and then after that, he said that he never had a hot dog again. He was grossed out by them. So, like, the part of the point is that some people don't want to know how the sausage is made, And they don't want to know, in this case, how the hot dog's made. And once they figure it out, then they don't want to have it anymore. So you see how they don't want to have it anymore? Or they don't want to know what it is? It's almost like ignorance is bliss for some people. And that's, I think, kind of more of where I take issue is like, it's one thing to not know, but it's one thing to know and then just kind of like either try and argue for it, like knowingly what it is, but trying to make it seem like it isn't that. Like the people who try to say something like isn't pay to win when it just literally clearly is. Like by definition, your scale of pay to win, you can argue that all day. Like, and I'm totally fine to argue that, like the nuance of how pay to win something is. But if something literally gives you power and you bought it, it's pay to win. It's kind of like how you guys remember how Rift used to tell people, Tryon used to tell people, oh, you can't buy the best raid gear, so it's not pay to win. It's like, I don't think that's how the definition necessarily works, because you're literally using the definition as a way to make money off of people. Like, why else would you want it to mean that? Or why else would you want it to mean that, So you can use it as a way to make money off of people. Oh, you're not buying power because it's not the most powerful thing in the game. And exactly, they didn't start that way, to be fair. They actually started very fairly with their model. It started, it was a chain reaction, basically, right? A domino effect. They felt the money, right? And they learned about the money from Korean developers and publishers. Sorry, that's just the true facts. Tryon, whenever they worked with XL Games, Jake Song, the creator of 3 of the most, iconic and pioneer MMOs ever, Nexus, Kingdom of the Wind, and then Lineage, and then Arcade. And now another game he's working on, by the way. So whatever it's going to be is going to be a hit. Literally, he's only ever worked on hits. Whether you think their hits are money makers more than their artistic games is kind of where I think I'm really conflicted with Jake's song. Like, his first 2 hits have to be given the credit they were given and have been given and should continue to be given. But with Arcade, it's actually a good example of a game that was pretty much made to make money. And I think that it's one of those games, that's why it's so hard to debate against people who play the game, is that they have already accepted that aspect of the game. Do you get what I'm saying? So, like, they've already bought into the fact that the game is pay to win. So you can't argue an Arcade player that something small is pay to win. Because to them, they're just like, I mean, the game has pay to win aspects, bro. Like, what are you complaining about? You know? What bothers me the most about Black Desert Online and Pearl Abyss is that they made 1.5 billion profit last year, but they don't put the money where their mouth is. BDO barely gets content, so all the predatory monetization and cash milking of the player base doesn't even benefit us in the end. That's exactly my point, Ashley. Is like, if people would see the nuance in what I'm saying, they'd see I'm on your side, right? Like, yes, I'm a hater of BDO because it gets hailed as the best combat ever, and I think even Vindictus is better, and maybe I'm just a little bit biased about that because I like Vindictus a lot. But Vindictus's combat to me is just really good, especially for the time that it came out. You know, it's like 2010 or whatever. Like, it came out at a time that like hitters were coming out, big games are coming out, and it was still better than most of these games in terms of its combat. But anyway, that's kind of my point. Is like, these aren't even benefiting you guys. Like, at least in STO's case, as long as you keep feeding it, it's gonna stay alive, right? So like, in the case of the people who have like the sunk cost fallacy of, if I leave, this game will die, I actually understand that. So that's not, maybe that's not even a fallacy. Maybe that's like totally understandable. You're almost like an investor at that point. You're just not getting any shares or anything. Like, you're just keeping this thing afloat. But it's the people who are like, you're not just keeping them afloat. Like Ashley Wright pointed out, you're making them nice big fat checks and bonuses. Meanwhile, you think that you're going to get something out of it. And all you're getting is just a pat on the back and good job. Keep spending, you know? You're not getting a bunch of new content. You're not getting these big new games that are going to push the envelope. It looks like they're actually shrinking the envelope with the games that are coming out in some respects, right? They're not thinking how to push PC. They're thinking mobile makes a lot of money. Let's make mobile games. Yeah, the thing is, though, is that Dark Souls is a single player game. So to me, I literally have almost zero interest in a single player game if the story isn't good or the combat isn't really good. Like, I mean, the combat has to be Jedi Academy levels for me, which is the best combat I've ever played in a single player game. Well, it can also be played multiplayer, but you get my point. And Dark Souls does not have anything close to the multiplayer capabilities of Jedi Academy, nor Jedi Outcast, and has none of the multiple capabilities of Vindictus either. So for me, it's just, there's a difference there. Dark Souls games SAT release have better PvP than most MMORPG out there. The funny thing is that their invade system is actually not a bad idea, and it could be done in other MMORPGs. Like, you could do it in SWTOR, you could do it in Guild Wars, you could do it in pretty much all of those style of games, in my opinion. ESO, you could really take that same exact idea of having like invades and story instances, and I think it would be awesome, personally. But obviously, I know the story fans can get a bit worried about getting their story experiences justifiably ruined. But I think if you, maybe it's like a toggleable thing, you just like press it and it gives you more experience or something like that. That'd be pretty cool. I would like it. How do you? My other issue with Dark Souls is I don't like make you slow as molasses gameplay and make your camera slow as molasses gameplay to add weight. Like, it's just, again, I don't want to get into a big rant about it because it's annoying to talk about that game when it's just like, I mean, I'm not even really a fan of it anyway, like that kind of game. So like, I'm not gonna I hate to talk shit about a game that I'm clearly not the person to come to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? But just to like explain myself a little bit more, like for me, I didn't even like Resident Evil 4. So I feel like that should just tell you straight up about my opinions about that kind of style of game. So well, no, I just don't like that style of game. I hate that style of game at Pin Zero. I literally don't even know what the fuck I would hate about Dark Souls, like specifically. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's actually a really cool aesthetic, and I love that it's more about lore and world story than maybe a typical narrative. Not my favorite, but I think that that's actually cool. But the whole slow camera, you move like 500 mile or 500 I don't know, it's just like every one of your abilities feels like it has 500 seconds of delay. How about that? And it's just like you feel like your camera's even delayed. And people like that. Like it feels like you have weight, and it feels like your attacks really connect with your target and things like that. But to me it just feels like you're kind of commanding. You remember like in Gears of War, like one of the biggest criticisms of that game was that it felt like you were like running around like a tank. To me, that's how I would describe these games too. But the difference is that Gears of War has a lot more movement tech. Like I was a big Gears of War 1 player, and I was a big Gears of War 2 player. In Gears of War 1, I could wall bounce, I could slide cancel, I could weapon slide cancel. I had so many options, like 4 different movement options to just increase the speed at which I can move. If you ever watch anybody play Gears of War 1, like if they know how to wall bounce, like they're fast in that game. So I don't mind it as much because it has more movement tech, but I guess that's a bit of my issue with these other clunky, tank control kind of games, is that you don't really have a lot of movement tech. And that's just not personally fun for me. Gacha games work like that, and they still are the most profitable game type right now. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not surprising to me when people say gacha games make a lot of money, because it's like, that's literally what they're designed to do. It's kind of like, if it was like, all of a sudden fighting games started to make a lot of money because somebody found like the cheat code in the industry, then I'd be super like surprised and like impressed. I'd be like, whoa, a fighting game took over like the market? Like, whoa, like how did this happen? Like, I'd really want to know. Like, but when someone tells me a gacha game makes a lot of money, I'm always just like, that's what they were designed for. Like, they're good at making a lot of money. It sucks. Like, I'm not saying we have to accept that as part of our reality. But it is reality, right? Like, we don't have to be okay with it. Rather, you do have to accept it as reality, because they've already announced in Korea alone like 5 high-profile mobile games. So it's gonna be reality regardless. But meaning you don't have to be necessarily okay with it, and you can be vocal and not even playing those games if they don't interest you, right? It's not like people are gonna stop making MMOs. That's for sure. I love watching Guild Wars 2 PvP, but there is so much tech in the gameplay, sometimes I have a hard time following. I had to read a lot about it. I think that the tech is a problem, but I think that Guild Wars' problem is more about its ability and I would say its ability and build related, or dominated, meaning that if you don't even know what the builds, like what the flavor of the month is, as we used to call it in Guild Wars 1, what the build of the week is, even like in Guild Wars 1 we had weekly builds. It's not as complex nowadays. In Guild Wars 2 it's like more like months and cycles and seasons, but if you don't even know what those are, yeah, you're gonna have a hard time understanding the gameplay. And it's just like, it was the biggest problem we had. I can actually talk to you about this from a former pro perspective. So when I was playing Guild Wars 2 early on, and I've mentioned the story before, being one of the first sponsored players in the game, even back then, even though I was a little bit more selfish than I am now, surely, I was looking at it from the perspective, like, how do we make this game exciting for people to watch? I was always looking at it from that perspective, because I always wanted it to become an esport. Guild Wars 1 was such a cool game to me that I wanted Guild Wars 2 to have some of that same shine. And so early on, I was really trying to help with rule sets and pushing kind of like helping people understand like the commentary aspects of things and trying to break down classes more. And you know what? I had a lot of fun doing that. But I have to admit, I don't really know how effective it was. And what I'm trying to say is that I don't think every game has to be an esport. I don't. And while I'm not going to say that Guild Wars 2 can't be an esport because of its history, it was poorly like handled in my opinion, more so than it's like a flawed game in that respect. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't have to be an esport. It could have just been a competitive game, just like Guild Wars 1 was. Guild Wars 1 wasn't even really an esport, but it had tournaments and it had a scene and it was supported and it made money. And it made people money who played the game. But yeah, I think them trying to make it like an esport was really the problem. And the reason why I think it's so problematic is just look at like typical sports, right? Typical sports, you don't really have a lot of complicated things going on. They're pretty typical. Like obviously you can meta break down the soccer plays of this and that and the whatever like sport is your favorite. Of course, everything has like nuance and super complexity, or it has like deep complexity to it, especially at the higher levels. But largely, like soccer or football, depending on where you're from, is the sport of kicking a ball into the goal, right? Like, and getting it across the field, kicking it into the other goal. Like, that's kind of like the general concept of it. So even if you don't really know what's going on, you don't know the intricacies of what a forward is and a defender and a goalie and whatever the hell, like you can still kind of be like, oh, they kicked it in the other goal. Score. Woohoo. That was a big reason why I thought Hutball was so cool, by the way, on another tangent in SWTOR, was that it actually had like esport elements to it. It felt kind of like an esport. Like it could be an esport. Not the engine, but like the mode. But then with like Guild Wars, it's like you have a 3 capture point style of conquest mode. Okay, that's already like unheard of in esports. Cool. So we started with something that's not even done before. Cool. And now we have this incredibly complex game with incredibly complex like builds and comps and different moves. And we're expecting players to be able to pick up on this stuff. And an esport pick up like that. Like that. It's like the only way that esport would ever work is if it started as not being an esport, meaning it would have to start with its own grassroots competitive scene and just slowly grow to that point. Because Blade and Soul has shown, like, you can have an esport that's like an MMO, especially one that is even 1v1. And Arena and WoW has shown that, obviously, to a lesser extent as well, you can also have competitive arenas in PvP. But Guild Wars 2 just, it didn't learn those lessons, and I think it just ultimately, almost in a good way, was too complex for esports. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you would ask me, would you have rather the game be as complex as it was in Guild Wars 1, but with the gameplay and mechanics required for Guild Wars 2? Of course, the answer is yes for me. But I think in trying to make it more esport-like, they kind of had to get rid of some of the complexity with it. Making it more broadly appealing also did that as well. So those two things, I think, made the game, clearly it's still a very difficult game, especially to follow. But I think ultimately it's why the game is kind of maybe not the best at being an esport, you know, as my voice cracks. I love Guild Wars 2 as a PvP game. I think it's still one of the best ones out there. But I think it really brings into question the whole idea of like, do esport or do MMOs, like PvP MMOs, do they need to be esport? Like, does every arena game need to be esports? Does every RPG that's online need to have some kind of esports? I don't really see them work that much, you know? Like, the only really, like, RPG like esports that you see work is probably, MOBAs, right? I guess people always use like the MOBA example. A MOBA would be a good example of being RPG-like, but why does a MOBA example always drive me mad when it's compared to MMOs? It's because like it's literally not long-term progression. Like it's complete utter opposite. Like every game is reset, so meaning it's not long-term progression. It's seasonal based essentially, right? Like every game's like a new season of PvP and then it resets. And so like it gives people a lot fresher of a slate, which makes them feel kind of not as much of a failure, right? Because long-term progression, long-term failure, right? Short-term progression, short-term failure. You can play game to game to game. You don't feel like you're losing as much, you know? You definitely are. You're probably losing even more, like literally losing more, but it's weird like that. Yeah. Weekly builds, yeah, it was a thing, man. I miss it. I miss it. The most gacha games are basically Pokemon. Pokemon. I guess Pokemon basically is gacha, dude. I don't know why I never even thought about that. Like, I'm not trying to say it is like 100% gacha, but I'm saying like it's kind of designed like gacha. Like it's collectibles and trade them for a value that's technically not even a real value. And yeah, I guess people have made that argument about card games before, that they're kind of gacha-like. But the difference there is that the card actually could have a value that you could trade for money. When in many cases, trading something from a gacha game wouldn't even have a value outside of it. But then I guess with virtual goods, that also calls that into question. And that's where Korea is so interesting, with how they view virtual goods being so different than the Western world. It's so hard to like one-to-one compare the two genres. It feels like genres. They're markets, but I say genres on accident, but it feels like two different genres in some cases. Because kind of they are. Like largely Asian MMOs are more like multiplayer online RPGs in most cases. They didn't used to be that way. In fact, most of them early on were pretty massive. Like Jake Song's two first games are pretty massive in my opinion. And those are probably two of the biggest like influences on the Korean MMO market. So it's incorrect to think that all Korean MMOs have been short-term progression, or sorry, long-term progression, grind 'em up games with smaller scale player base or smaller scale engagements, because it hasn't always been the case. It's something that happened very quickly, but it wasn't originally that way. They actually were pretty massive to start. Like even like the game that I mentioned was my first like MMO experience, Dark Eden, which was made by a Korean company. Even that game felt massive for the time. Like still is massive in my opinion to this day. It's way more massive than games like Path of Exile, right? Like you can feel it's way more massive because you can actually run around and zone to zone and see like players everywhere. Because yeah, if you come across something like a stab flamethrower engineer and don't understand that build, it's very confusing shit. Even the one with the gun, where you jump up and pound onto the ground and you do that whole might combo or whatever the hell. Like, if you don't know what you're doing or like what you're watching, you just see some guy going. He makes that noise. you know what noise I'm talking about, Boss? It's like such a stupid noise. I know you have to know what I'm talking about. Or they do that thing where they jump up in the air and they do the explosion thing, jump on you, then it like knocks you down. They do the kickback thing and they do the whole little combo or whatever. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, yeah, it's the dodge or die combo basically. You just see people getting deleted and you're like, what the hell? How are people dying so fast? But yeah, that NG combo is pretty nuts. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about games, is that sometimes they can be designed in a certain way. Like, for example, we talked about Arcade being designed to make money. But it doesn't mean it's a bad game, right? It had a lot of innovation. I mean, Arcade is probably the best, like, sand park, like, in between being a sandbox and a theme park game we've seen, like, yet. But it's also probably one of the most like money grub hungry games we've seen as well. So even a baby can swing its arms around. I feel like Guild Wars 2 had the same problem a card game called Spoils had. Before it came out, they were like, yo, we're going to have big ass tournaments and huge prize pools and it's going to be lit. And then it wasn't. Yeah, and part of the problem is that just straight up, like, that's why I call out, you know, John Peters and some of the Guild Wars 2 developers in my most recent Crucible video, actually, is that y'all straight up just didn't listen to us. Like, that's just facts. Y'all did not listen to us. People like me were crying on the forums endlessly since the very beginning about that game's PvP scene. Because I was telling people, y'all want to make this an esport? We didn't even ask y'all to make one. Y'all want to make an esport? This game type is not going to work. This game mode is not going to work. The speed of the gameplay and the over-reliance on power is not going to work because it's too fast for this kind of game. They didn't listen. Bunker gameplay is going to ruin this game and ruin the esports scene. They did not listen. We were very clear about this from the very beginning. We talked to developers. We literally even knew the developers. We had chats with them sometimes. You know? Like, it's just like, they straight up just did not listen to us about that. Anyway, when you have like conversations with developers and you're trying to explain these concepts to them, but they just don't understand it, it makes you think that they just don't think you understand it. You get what I'm saying? Like, they think that you're the one that doesn't understand it because you don't know everything about like the inner workings of things. Sometimes people have that perspective. It's actually a fallacy to think that because somebody doesn't have all of the information, that they can't make a good assessment of something. I can't remember the name of the fallacy, but I'm sure somebody in chat knows it. But it's essentially like, because somebody has like maybe some details wrong, they can't actually be right. Right? Of course that's wrong. Like, sometimes you can get things wrong, but actually like know a lot about something, right? Maybe you got a couple of details wrong. Maybe you even got most of the details wrong, but maybe you knew something that was right, right? And yeah, it was just I would say Guild Wars 2 is one of the most frustrating MMO like competitive PvP experiences I've had, just because like we kept trying to tell them what the problems were, and in hindsight, my young 18, 19-year-old self was right. Or 20 or whatever I was, like, I was pretty right about my criticism, like saying that the bunker meta was going to destroy the game. They knew that now and changed it, by the way, like way later. Telling them that power over tweaking was going to change the game, or was going to ruin the game. They also changed it like 2 years later as well. It's just like, you wish that they would have listened to you back then, is all I'm saying. But that's the difficulty with having an MMO esport. It's like, you literally have to balance it. Like, but why can't they do that? Because they didn't fully commit to separating the game. PvP and PvE balancing. Guild Wars 1 did that. To me, that was the biggest mistake that Guild Wars 2 made, was not separating the two. Now, there were some separate abilities. I will admit that, as everybody in chat should know. There were some that were not playable in PvP. But the overwhelming majority of them, I don't think, were split balance-wise. And I think it's why we had such problems with classes like the Guardian, because if they removed a lot of its survivability, then in PvE, it wouldn't be a tank anymore. You see, the problem is, like, how do you fix the bunker meta when the Guardian is supposed to be hard to kill? Well, the game type doesn't work, guys. Like, we also tried to tell you that. Nobody does domination-style game types in competitive except one game, and I'm pretty sure it's COD, and it has a map named Domination. So it's like, no one really else uses that kind of like model. Overwatch has King of the Hill maps, which people hate mostly, like me. I hate them. But people don't even necessarily seem to like those. So I'm just saying, like, that kind of like, you know, mode or design wasn't working and didn't work. So maybe that was more of the problem than the fact that Guardians were hard to kill. Because the fact that Guardians were hard to kill was basically compounded on the fact that the game design was so easy to exploit. So Pin Zero is I think you're right. Guild Wars 2 is too complex for the average player to follow, but it's not flashy enough for people to appreciate what's going on. See, I disagree with it not being flashy enough for people to appreciate what's going on. I think it's more that there's just such a knowledge gap there in an MMO where you have to level up to max level. Not saying you have to level up your PvP characters necessarily, but just like to understand the game. Like, yeah. I think it's this ever battle of ignorance that you're fighting against. I don't think you're going to win that, is what I'm saying. Like, I think there's always going to be people who just don't know what's going on, and that's okay. I think the better thing is like, maybe it doesn't have to be this big esport, you know? Maybe it just has to be a small scale, kind of maybe more of a humble game, right? Maybe it has like a slower competitive scene, like a basic year-long season, which results in a big tournament. Maybe they just take the exact same model they had in the first game, which is like weekly tournaments, daily tournaments, monthly oh wait, they ended up doing that in the end, just much later. Like 2 years after the game came out, by the way. That was the big problem as well, was just the speed at which they added these things into the game. The majority of the players had already moved on, so I think you're right now, Pin Zero, but I think when the game came out, there was a lot of talent in the game. They just left so quickly because talent like that doesn't stick with a game that doesn't have a future. I'm curious on your thoughts on AOC aiming, you mean Ashes of Creation? Because I also think Age of Conan, because, you know, I came from that age. Gotcha. Or no damage meter of any sort. What do you mean by a damage meter? You mean like seeing what your DPS like counter is or something? Like a what's that add-on called? No way to track and no add-ons either? Wait, so no add-ons or no damage meter? Because those are different things. Okay, so no add-ons at all. Recount, that's the name of it. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name. Recount. What are my thoughts on that? No add-ons in 2020 seems kind of stuck in the past a little bit, if I'm being honest, considering we had games with badass add-ons back then. And I've said it many times, guys. It's been proven too many times. I don't want to have to... You guys ever seen that meme where it's like, do we have to keep teaching you this lesson, old man?
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
So the joke being, the community is just better at like designing things because they care more about their enjoyment of something versus how much money they're making from it. So it's kind of like, to put it bluntly, why are add-ons and mods and things like that so effective at like prolonging a game's life cycle or increasing people's enjoyment for it? It's basically because they, obviously in the case of like Morrowind or like Oblivion, Skyrim, like those games, like they add a lot of content to it. But in the case of an MMO, they, in many cases, fix problems. And that's kind of the problem here is like, Warhammer is a good example of that, where in many cases, add-ons actually just make the game more enjoyable to play. So for a game that's, or a genre rather, that is known for being rather tedious, the MMO genre, I guess I'm just a little bit worried anytime people try to not let you have more ways of decreasing tedium. Because I actually like add-ons and I support them like very fully. But I also will say that it's well within your decision as a developer to choose to close the source of your game, basically. And understandable, I would even say, especially like if your game isn't designed to be modulated, I guess, or like tweaked in that way. Maybe you don't want people to try to mess around with it like that for reasons of like security reasons, but maybe like also performance, or maybe even like they could tweak some things they're not supposed to tweak, you know, like maybe it's not even designed for that type of editing and fiddling around. So I basically like close versus open circuit, you know, Windows versus Apple. Apple does pretty damn well without having to be open circuit, so clearly you don't have to be open in software or hardware, but I guess I just personally lean towards more of a game that is. So I'm eager to see how their hybrid combat system works, especially like the UI and some of that kind of aspects, because those are where I think like players really excel at creating content, is different UI, customizing the colors of things, allowing you to remove, like in Warhammer, you could remove certain parts of the display that you didn't like. So I guess I'm maybe like, it's the old school gamer in me. Just, I'm always going to lean towards having add-ons. But I would never say a game's going to be bad or not because it doesn't have add-ons. I would say an RPG would be worse because it doesn't have mods. You know what I'm saying? I would make that case. Because, yeah, like, MMO add-ons, they're not the best, like, compared to, like, other game genres and their add-ons. But they're just more about increasing your enjoyability and decreasing tedium, you know? Whereas in other genres, it's more about, like, adding content to the game. So, it's a big distinction. Meaning it's not as bad of a problem for an MMO to not have content updates in the form of add-ons, because they just don't do it that way anyway. So it's more of like, if the only thing the add-ons are really going to change is just the ease of access, the quality of life changes, and how accessible the game is, if the developers do a good job of that, then it kind of doesn't really need to be done, you know? But I guess that's kind of my point here, is that you're putting a lot of faith in developers to do it right, if you don't let players actually change and fiddle with things. And so we'll see what that looks like. But I've always loved add-ons because, like, scrolling text, for example, has always been an add-on in Warhammer that I was very fond of. I couldn't imagine playing the game without scrolling text, you know? So there are some add-ons in MMOs that, for me, I couldn't imagine not playing the game without them now. But at the same time, if those aspects were already fixed, then maybe I would have never needed an add-on in the first place, right? How's it going, Supermarket Crap? You think you do, but you don't. Exactly, Frag Feast. They're just some things that you won't really know unless you have 500 hours plus doing that one thing. The minstrel amulet. Oh man, I'm pretty sure I stopped playing around that time. Oh wait a minute, maybe I'm thinking about a different amulet. What amulet are you talking about? Because you said it was removed so quickly. I don't remember an amulet getting removed so quickly, but that could be why. What was the minstrel? Why does it sound like I'm menstruating as well, by the way, when I'm wearing this amulet? Watching Summit Rage quit Guild Wars 2 from PvP was fun. Is today like the Be Mean day or something, or like Talk Trash day? I've been playing a lot more COD lately, okay? So maybe that's what it is. That old, like, gamer bro part of me is, like, reawakening. But I've watched Summit play, like, the PvE of Guild Wars. I never watched him PvP. Can someone send me the video of him playing PvP? But I watched the PvE videos, and even when I was watching those, I was kind of biting my nails being like, this guy's gonna cry when he PvPs. Like, sorry. He just seems like that kind of guy. Yeah. Like it. I saw that coming, I guess. Was anyone surprised by that, I guess? Like, Limpos? Like, no way you would have been surprised by that, right? If you've ever seen Summit play, I'm not sure if you've ever watched anyone on Twitch or something. I don't know how many people, like, actually watch other people on Twitch. Like, I watch, maybe, like, 2 other channels, but I used to watch it a lot more. When I was working in, construction, I would always take my lunch breaks and watch, streams. And I just haven't been doing it. You lose as much interest to just watch content when you work on your computer, you know, at home. Because it's like, it's not as fun to just sit there and just watch, you know? It's like, sometimes I just want to get off my computer even. A game like AOC needs some metric to measure individual contribution in group content. I don't know if it needs it. I honestly disagree with the mentality that it needs it. But I can tell you right now, people will find a way to measure something. So if they're trying to get rid of elitism, they will never get rid of elitism. The genre is literally founded by elitists. The nerdiest nerds of the nerd. Like, look at the people who founded this industry. I love them all. Great, amazing nerds. But nerds nonetheless, right? We were all, like, born into the nerddom, the elitism life. I'm not saying that's like the only way to make an MMO or to make an RPG or to make a game. I'm just saying, like, from the very beginning, it's been that way. We've always been exclusive. We've always said, how much DPS do you do? Did you do enough DPS this round? I think people just need to get more used to that and realize it's less of that being the problem and more of you just need to know how to make friends that aren't going to judge you for that kind of stuff. Meaning that if you keep joining a pug game and people keep saying your DPS sucks, maybe joining the pug game is the problem, not the fact that you feel like everyone says you need to be the best player in the world. You get what I'm saying? That's more of your perception because those players make you feel that way. But like when I play with my friends, we don't have that mentality of you must do this DPS. It's like, no, it's more that like, if you don't feel like you're being useful, that's a different conversation than your DPS numbers aren't high enough. You get what I'm saying? Now, if we're trying to reach like mythic level, then we would have a whole different conversation. At that point, we're not talking about does your build work? We're talking about how well does it work? And that's just my thing is like, standards aren't monolithic, guys. Like, I don't know why I constantly get like argued at with like, oh, but the standards of MMOs are so elitist everywhere. And it's like, I mean, I'm not going to deny that they're definitely like elitist kind of games and stuff. Like, and they're very like, knowledge dependent, but it's like, you just need to find the right kind of people to play with. That's kind of the case of like any kind of sport. Like, if I walk into a collegiate basketball gym, yeah, everyone's going to expect me to run for rebounds and jump out of bounds and try to save the ball, the dead ball, and like, and you know what I'm saying? Like, and play post and things like that. Like, because I'm a bigger guy, like, I expect all of that. Because I've been to those places. I played ball at those places. Not everyone's not going to be my friend at those places, right? We're just trying to compete. But if I want to go play like basketball with my friends, which is what I preferred to do, right? Then it's a different ball game because, well, literally a different ball game. No pun intended. But just meaning more from the perspective of like, I know what the expectations are. When we go into this game playing with my friends, not all of my friends are like college players or like we're going to be college players or like even played high school. So it's like we're just playing for fun, you know? But if I went and just played a random game of pickup basketball and my team got mad at me because I wasn't trying to win my hardest, would I then go tell everybody that every game of basketball is so try hard because everybody wants to win? I guess when people make this mentality apparent online, it kind of reminds me about how maybe not everybody has experience with doing sports or even games in real life. Like board games, you know, physical games, any kind of sport. Like Because if you have any experience with those things, then this is a very normal concept to you, basically. You shouldn't expect a complete utter stranger to like you. Like it. Sorry to bring it to bust, or is it burst? You know how my brain at the 1.5 hour mark starts to go totally fried because I fast myself? Burst your bubble. Sorry to burst your bubble. But yeah, that's just kind of how it works, you know, is like, it'd be nice if every time we played as a group with other players in any kind of environment, whether it be sports, a video game, or whatever, watching anime, we could all be homies and just hang out and be friends. But some of us maybe don't like each other. Maybe we don't share things in common with each other. Maybe we have different perspectives on what's considered hardcore, right? That's kind of my central point here is people's view of what is considered fun is different. And sometimes my view of fun is just, hey, let's try this like really gimmicky build, but we're still going to try to win as hard as we can. Because I'm always trying to win when I'm playing a game, but sometimes I might say, okay, I know this build works, but let's try this other build just for the sake of it, you know? Are you personally interested in Ashes of Creation, or it's just not the kind of MMORPG you like? I just don't get hyped by games that can't show me proof in the pudding. Like, just to put it bluntly, Scion, like, maybe you think I don't like the game because I never talk positively about it. At this point, I don't talk positively about any game in development, really. Like, when I say positively, I mean, you'll never hear me say this is the next coming of Jesus, buy this and everything's going to be great and the MMO industry is saved. That is behind me, guys. I used to do that when I was a kid, and I've been following MMOs for 20 years now, so it's like, I got burnt out on having that very, like, idealistic viewpoint of like, man, I like this, so I hope it does really well. It's like, MMOs are more than any other game, period, in my opinion, are proof in the pudding. You have to show people that your world works, right? It's literally its own world, its own ecosystem. You have to prove that that works in live. Like, there's no like, oh, it has cool ideas, it's gonna work. The gameplay looks cool, it's gonna work. The graphics are awesome, it's gonna work. None of that matters. The social systems matter. The social hierarchies matter. The time sinks. The player interactivity. The need for players to form groups, right? Against hard and maybe harsh environments, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that you only see that from testing the game. And I mean like fully testable, not like battle royale, whatever mode. Like, I'm saying like actually like MMO portion testable. So when that is testable in Ashes of Creation and all of these other Kickstarter games and all of these other MMOs, then you guys can come bother me and say, how come you haven't played it yet? How come you haven't covered yet? And I'll take that on the chin. I'll take that. I'm okay with that. Like, I know I can be slow to cover things sometimes. So if you guys just come and tell me, say, hey, Lost Ark is launching, blah, 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 blah. Are you going to play it? Hold me accountable. I'm cool with that. Like, I don't mind that. I want to be held accountable. But I'm not going to expect to be held accountable for things where they can't even prove what they're saying yet. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, I'm not saying don't get hyped. I'm not saying don't be excited. That's your own volition, especially if you put money into something. Remember, I always tell you, like, if you're willing to spend money on a Kickstarter or a pre-order, it means you're willing to lose it. So, like, your own money is your own decision. I can't get as hype as I used to because I need to see the actual world working and people doing these open world dungeons that they're talking about. That sounds awesome to me. If you guys know me, you know open world dungeons and PvE mixing with PvP is my favorite thing in an MMO, period, not roleplay. So those two things are some of my favorite things to do. Roleplay and have the intermingling of open world PvE content with PvP content. And the reason being is because to me, that makes sense. That's how the world works. We would be hunting somebody and all of a sudden another tribe attacks you. That's content. That creates a lot of engagements. It creates rivalries. It creates resource generation. It creates a desire for conflict or to avoid conflict. Like, all of that creates fun, basically. Conflict is fun in the context of a video game. As long as it's not just one side bullying the other side. And that's your job as a developer, is to make sure that doesn't happen, right? Like, design systems in place so that kind of bullying can't happen. So when people say, yeah, but what if people just like endlessly gank the dungeon zones? Well, your faction, your guild, go round up a bunch of people, go do something about it. So how Ashes of Creation is going to handle that and griefing in these places, I don't know yet. They don't probably necessarily even know yet. Or maybe haven't made it necessarily public yet. So that's something that we would actually have to test ourselves. You see what I'm saying? So like someone like me, you need me in your game to test that out. You need someone like me who has a very PvP-centric mind to think, how do I exploit these rules? And how do I make it to where I can take advantage of this game's rule system or the rules and the PvP system? And, you know, historically, I'm really good at that. It's why I get invited to go test these games. It's why I was able to tell, you know, Amazon Game Studios pretty early on, I can say, that whatever update ended up happening to the game, this is my way of skirting the NDA, was basically how I felt as well. So whenever New World had to revamp their PvP, I said and applauded them for doing it, because I was one of the people originally saying that it needed to be done as well. So I'm just saying, like, my perspective is looking at it from the PvP perspective. So the only way you can test out PvP systems in a real, like, ecosystem of the world, a server, whatever you want to call it, right, is by watching it play out, right? Like, you have to literally let the server run. Let it run its course. What happens if the economy starts today? What happens if guilds start recruiting tomorrow? What happens if the raid bosses are available to kill next week? Like, this is part of the process of testing out the world. And you have to be able to move with these things, because maybe you made the game too easy and you have to make it a little bit more difficult. Maybe you made it too difficult. You have to make it a little bit easier. If you go too far into one direction, you can ruin your game. You see, like, the balance is really just in the feedback. It's in the testing. And I think that's kind of why, if I had to sum up my thoughts on the newest age of MMOs to come that haven't yet come versus like the ones of the old, the biggest differences being is back then, they were way more transparent about it. Now, people invest more money of their own money, and yet they're less transparent. Think about that. There's less transparency with a lot of games today in the MMO industry than there was back then when it was ran by corporate entities. Like, what? And I think it's just because, like, as fan bases, we've basically accepted that. We've accepted being ignorant. We've accepted not holding developers and publishers accountable as much. But, like, back then, a beta, as said by Richard Garriott, was a true beta. It was, as I'm mentioning, a way to test out the systems of the game. Is the game fully balanced out? These days, a beta, the balancing is already done pretty much. So it's like, if you play a beta and an MMO beta, and you feel like the game doesn't have enough content, 9 times out of 10, you're probably right. And I'm telling you that from my perspective, in my 20 years of covering this shit and playing these games, whenever I feel in beta, and I've done 24 major betas at least, that there's not enough content, I've almost always been right. Almost always been right. So I should have trusted my hunches, is what I'm trying to say. Trust me, and the fact that I had to learn the hard way. You get what I'm saying? Like, I spent that month or 2, 3 after SWTOR launch, and for some delusional reason, I just thought it was going to be better. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't thinking about that. I don't know. When I look back, I think, why did I think it was going to be different when I already played the game for like a year and a half up to that point? And I knew it was going to run out of content instantly. Why did I think it was going to be... Did I think that they were just going to like unveil all of this secret content that was like hidden away and it was going to save the day? You know, like, I guess I did. Naively. You see what I'm saying? It's just like, when you call into question this stuff and you've been through it before, it really makes you think differently about it. And yeah, so good question. But I hope I can understand my perspective better, because I want to be the first to say, when a game is good, I'm the first to hype it up. Like, I really am. Like, you guys heard me talk about Crusader Kings 3, like, over and over and over again, because I really think it's a good game. I can't wait till the DLC comes out. When have you ever heard me say that? I hate DLC typically, but I cannot wait to play the DLC in Crusader Kings. because I want to see what they have in store. I want to see what else they can add complexity to the game. I'm curious to see what they have, you know? And I can't wait. Do I get paid by Crusader Kings? Do I even cover like the RTS genre really that much? No. But it's easy for me to talk about a game that I think is good. So it's hard for me to talk about a game that isn't even out yet, or isn't even playable, or isn't even like provable. How about that? It's not provable that it works. So I'm more interested in, right now, for example, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. In fact, for me, personally, right now, it's the most fun I've had playing a shooter. Man. Since, like... I can't even remember, to be honest. I can't. I'm really enjoying Cold War, though. Like, one thing I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of related to what we've just been talking about, actually, is Cold War has this really interesting duality of perspective on it. So, I was reading the Reddit, and the Reddit was saying that they missed Modern Warfare. Like the other Modern Warfare, the one that just came out, like the 2017 one or 18 one. And that they liked that version better because it basically had a longer time to kill. It felt like, you know, you had more of a chance to come back in fights and blah, 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 blah. So I thought that was really interesting because as I'm reading this post on Reddit, and it's upvoted out the wazoo, has a bunch of posts on it, I realized something. So this is one perspective. I wonder what the other one is. So then I went and looked at the pro scene, the competitive scene, game battles, and all that stuff. And I saw what are these people's like perspective on the game? Like, what do they think of the game? What do you think I found? The complete opposite. Literally the complete opposite. It was like, it's, guys, go check it out for yourself. It's so interesting to observe. And it's basically that the people who enjoyed the previous Modern Warfare game were the casual player base who bought the game, basically. They don't like Cold War because it's not as easy as the previous game, even though it feels more like a COD game. Isn't that interesting? It just goes to show you that if you let your franchise basically be co-opted by a group of players who don't even play the game originally in the same way, that's what happens to your game. It literally kind of loses a part of its identity. Now, I'm not going to like debate the semantics because I know people have subjective differences and stuff, but let me just come out and say, like, pretty much all of the competitive players are saying that they like Cold War more. And from my perspective as a competitive player for, you know, since the Halo 2 days, I can say I think it's just because the time to kill is faster. So like when you're a good shot in this game, you can just delete people, especially with headshots. Like it makes you feel like you're rewarded for being a good player. Like and all the guns feel and fire like powerfully. Like it feels like you're actually like shooting your target, and it's not just like they're like a bullet sponge like in Black Ops 4 and 3 and all these other COD games that I didn't like that much. As a main healer, most games have garbage interface to keep track of things. Definitely. That's actually a good point. I remember, was it Hotted? I think it was Hotted. Hotted was, like that group healing app, right? And WoW. I think it was Hotted. Or am I thinking of the name of the pro? Hotted. Excuse me. Was it Hot? I can't remember what it was called. Healbot? Was it Healbot? You know what? Healbot is the name of the app. Hotted is the name of the pro who played Druid. How weird is that I remembered the name of the like 6-time gladiator Hotted? Like that's how my brain works, guys. Like I can't remember shit for the life of me, but I'll remember like the most random details. Like I remember like a top druid player, a resto druid player for some reason. Minstrel is hot, so doubtful. Okay, I was gonna say, like, I'm pretty sure Minstrel came way after launch, because I don't remember it, to be honest. And by the way, that was way back there. Ooh, what is this one? I gotta turn it down because I could tell it's gonna be loud. All right, should we break this down? You guys, I know you guys want me to do commentary, so I'm gonna do it. Are these two different ones? All right. So I literally used to do this like on my channel. I used to make commentaries of fights and PvP matches and stuff. So I feel like I have a decent job of doing this. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna play it through normally, and we're just gonna kind of react live. And then maybe we'll even go back at some parts. So I want to say to start this fight off, I don't know why Summit's heal's already down. Either that means he already healed, or it means he canceled his own heal, which is very common. So he pops his Rampage cooldown here in a 1v1, immediately leads with his charge, which, by the way, is exactly what you would expect somebody to do whenever they go Rampage. So a big part of Guild Wars like 2's PvP is all about prediction and knowing what your opponents are going to do. And that's why it's hard for players to follow, because they don't have any experience playing the game. So like, even when I was streaming the game, a lot of the people who were watching me who even played the game were saying, bro, we don't even know what you're doing. Like, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this game is like this. Like, if you don't even know what the builds are doing or what someone else is trying to do, then you don't know that this is literally the most like obvious thing that you would do. Like Limpos just said, it's a bull rush or it's a charge off the Rampage. Like, people are always going to know you're going to do that because it shows you flying across and you shoulder like charge, and it shows like the little graphic of you flying at somebody so they can predict it, especially if they're far away, which is why it's important to bulls charge somebody close, not far away. You see, like, because then there's less time to react to it. But that's why this game is very mechanical, is that it really does matter where you are whenever you use the ability. So immediately he casts it, which is basically what you would expect. So as soon as he runs in there, he gets hit by a... Man, what the heck hit him there? Let's see. Okay, so that was that a Grasping Roots? I couldn't tell if that was a Grasping Roots. Oh, Grasping Roots was the thing that fired first, then he Spinal Shivers? Maybe? Or Grasping Hands or Undead or whatever the fuck it's called, the one that comes from the ground. Looked like he did a PB AoE, so a placeable AoE targetable, and then immediately after follow it up, and the conditions were consumed as well, right? No. So right here, the conditions weren't consumed. So right now he has 2 conditions. They're not consumed yet. Yeah, so it could have been a Spinal Shivers and not a Feasting Corruption. So it probably was Spinal Shivers with an axe, right? Yeah, it looks like it is. So Spinal Shivers, and then he has an axe. So we're playing against a power Necro, and we're playing as a power warrior, and I believe he's playing the Firebrand build or whatever, right? Or what's that one called with the 2 little with the it's not Firebrand, with Spellbreaker. Thank you. Limpos is literally like the person who remembers everything for me. You're like, I should just like put you in my head. Cause you remember all the names, dude. Like, even today, like every time I've asked, you've remembered the names. So I appreciate that. Cause I'm like so horrible with names, guys. I'm sorry. All right. So then he does a dash back. I'm just gonna assume that was nerves or button smashing. I'm just trying to think, like, what was he thinking here exactly? Let's see. Because he doesn't have view, and he also knows that the target is over here on the far right. So I'm gonna say it was probably a misclick. All right, he got a knock down finally off, and actually managed to interrupt an ability, which is pretty crucial here. So immediately he runs into his dash, which gets dodged immediately, by the way. You notice that? Watch. Oh, no, he actually landed it. 2,700 damage, not bad. Why are you fighting in this form, though? I'm curious. Okay. Sorry. let me try to like figure this out. What is going on here? All right, so homeboy pops his rampage, which, by the way, he would have already lost to any necromancer who plays conditions, because nearly all of them take corrupt boon. So you would probably lose almost immediately as soon as you casted this. In fact, I would argue if a warrior casted this immediately, I'd 0.5 him. It'd be one of the easiest fights. Because once I rip your stability, there's, like, you lost. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't stop me from fearing you, which means I can interrupt your heal, which means you lose. It's like the key of fighting a necro is you can't get feared. If you get feared while you're healing and you lose your heal cooldown, it's over. Like, it's done. Especially if they have conditions, because they could just starve you out and sit in Shroud. Power versus power is a little bit different, because it's more about you're trying to burst through their DPS but not blow your whole load, because they have a Shroud, so they basically have another life bar. Alright, so he's landing some good shots here. You know, he got some hits in. Okay, so now he's out of his rampage. And he's got 9,800 health and a full cooldown on his heal, which, by the way, was already off cooldown before he popped his ult, meaning that he could have had it off cooldown again. So now he's running away. He heals, immediately gets dazed, which means the guy's probably using the war horn, not the focus, because as far as I know, the Necro doesn't really have any consistent daze besides their war horn. So there you go. And let's see.
The fucking silence. You really?
Warhorn is trash 1v1, so that's why I know the Necro's not a good player. Sorry, whoever that was, and if you disagree with me, you can 1v1 anytime. Alright, so he gets interrupted by the 4 here. Warhorned. Uh-oh. He's getting 2'd right here, too. He's about to die to the 2. You hear the noise. And so right now, his heal's about to come off a cooldown. He hasn't used his ult yet. He hasn't used his Frenzy combo, nor his Endure Pain, which... Wait, is that a Shrug It Off? Is that a Shrug It Off? Or is that an Endure Pain? I can't remember because they look so similar. Oh, it's the Shake It Off. Sorry, Shake It Off, not Shrug It Off. Shake It Off. Has he even used that a single... Doesn't that heal you when it removes a condition? You guys want to know why I make fun of him, dude? Only because he acts like such a little twat about it, alright? That's if y'all want me to be honest about it. That's the only reason why I make fun of him. Because he was such a little dick about it. Like, people, trust me, people have been complaining about this for a while for me. Like, they've been telling me a while about this. And I didn't know that he had played PvP yet. So when I watched him stream, I was just like, oh, I don't know. This is like the vet. And then it was, anyway. So, like, my issue with Summit has just been, he is very negative mentality regarding learning. And also, I think he's honestly pretty negative influence on people in that regard, because he's a really good player, but he never really kind of talks about or shows you the aspects of how he became a good player. It's almost like you miss that part of his journey. So it's almost like all you see of Summit sometimes is just like, he's a good player and you don't know why. You know what I'm saying? And like, I feel like he actually is a really good player. Like, I've played Overwatch with him back in the day all the time, actually, in lobbies. And he was even pretty good back then. But he refused to play the meta. even in Overwatch. You see what I'm saying? So it's almost like he just gets by off of just being a good player, and he doesn't learn as much. And so this is just why I didn't expect him to do very well in PvP in this game, because this game is hard in PvP, especially if you don't know anything. Anyway, so he bulls charged right here and misses. And then he said he got silenced, which is just hilarious to me. At this point, I think he's already lost. And here's why. His heal is up, correct. But any good Necro worth their salt would immediately fear this heal. And he didn't. Why didn't this Necro just win the game? Like, look. The Necro shrouds right here. I'll show you. Necro's in shroud. His shroud dies. Okay, he gets the interrupt off. Shroud's not on cooldown. Still on cooldown. Shroud is still on cooldown. Okay, fair enough. His shroud is still on cooldown, so he probably shrouded too late. Or too early. He probably had 2 dodges. I don't know why he shrouded so early, actually. Yeah, see, right here, he's actually fighting. He's not shrouding for defensive purposes. He's fighting. In my opinion, the Necro played this like he was the warrior. Like he's playing a warrior. Because if he played this like he was a Necro, he would have won the fight. Like 100%. Let's see. He didn't dodge right there. He shrouded. So what dodges did he blow? Let's see. Dodge. Okay, he blew 1 dodge so far. Maybe that was a dodge. Which means the dodge is back in just a couple of seconds. Yeah, no, he went Reaper Shroud offensively, not defensively. Which means it was a mistake. Because if he would have just waited, dude, he could have just landed the fear or the CC. I think he would have killed him right there.
You really hit me with the fucking silence there. Dude.
Oh, he missed his spin? Yeah, that would make sense.
What more can your fucking class have? Oh, it's actually unreal. You have a fucking
oh, it uses your 3rd dodge? Ah. Good to know. For no reason. Gotcha. He had LOS. Ah, okay. So he missed.
You have a fucking ultimate that does whatever the fuck you want. I'm blown away.
Why is he not healing, by the way?
You have a fucking ultimate that does whatever the fuck you want. I'm blown away.
He's not using his cooldowns here. He's just tilted, guys. Like, come on. Like, he's just tilted right here.
I'm blown away. It's fucking incredible.
At that point, he's just tilted. All right, is there any more fights in this one, or is he just angry at the rest of this? Because I don't want to kick the guy when he's down. I want to actually see if he does some more fights. Is he? Wait, so is he just like angry? Oh no. Should I even click on this? Like. Yeah, I'm wondering if I should click this.
Since when have you been 1v1ing people in the private arena though, like as
like the thing? Yo, whoever that was, you're a real one, dude. Whoever said that, man. Oh man, that's a friend right there. No, seriously, like, no bullshit. That's a really good friend. Whoever said that, that person means well. Like, they're not, honestly, they were not trying to tilt him. I don't think so. I refuse to believe that. I honestly think they were trying to help him when they said that. Did y'all hear that? Like what?
3, 5v5.
Sounds like I'm good then.
Since when have you been 1v1ing people in the private arena though, like as a thing?
The guy literally says, since when have you been 1v1ing people in private arena? Like, meaning like, you literally don't even 1v1. You haven't been beating people 1v1. Why do you think you should be winning this? Like, imagine if I went into CSGO and I tried to just like 1v1 summit and like never like tried to learn the game or some shit and was just like getting frustrated about it. Of course I'm getting frustrated. He's gonna destroy me. And maybe even like a lesser player. It doesn't even have to be someone that good. It could be like, shit, right now I'm so washed I get washed by a double AK player. You could put a double AK player up against me, he'd destroy me, you know? The Warrior is a good counter to Reaper, Limpos. That's why I'm a bit confused, because if he played with a sword, with an axe and a shield, I've been beaten by axe shield warriors all the time as a Reaper. All the time, bruh. Like, it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. You have to have a little bit of skill. You have to know how to block and switch between your weapons and stuff, but like, 100% a winnable fight. Anti-success logic is the worst. The problem with MMOs is people will be like, it's just a game, I can't spend all day on it. But it's a game, I should be able to see all content just by owning the game. That's cool, but we have to learn to ignore that, basically. Because that outside voice, while it's important every now and then, if it is how we define the genre, then the genre won't be what it is, basically. It'll just be a different genre. It will be people like, I know martial arts, I should be able to compete in any martial art. In fact, that does happen sometimes. And that is exactly a really good analogy to use, to go back a little bit, by the way. I'm catching up here. I think the issue is that fan bases are outright extremely hostile these days. Like, people are not even able to behave normally, sadly, in the online world. I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to say that, like, it wasn't easier to maybe make friends online before in the past. But my point is that the friends, or making friends with strangers, might be more difficult because of aspects that have changed in civilization and whatever else. But my argument there is that I don't see meeting strangers as a realistic way to make friends normally anyway. It's pretty low percentage. Most of us meet strangers and never talk to them. Most of us meet strangers and never see them again. So like, it's pretty normal to meet a stranger and not actually be friends with them. In fact, you might even meet someone that you're not friends with. In fact, you might even meet someone that you dislike. So like, I think that like very I guess statistically, you know, like in terms of like your interactions with people, and they're not always going to be perfect, they're not always going to be good. It's just that you're exposed to more of the idiots online. In fact, like in my case, like I don't really get a lot of the angry ragers in person, just generally, because first off, I don't tolerate that. I would just leave or not deal with it, or it's kind of more of a thing you see online when people don't have to worry about like a physical like consequence, people staring at them and kind of like being like, what are you doing? Like, there's no shame aspects as much as like in public places. Like online, yeah, there's a lot anonymity, obviously. There's a lot going for people who can just kind of be assholes without a whole lot of like downside. And I'm not saying that that's okay. My argument is never like, it's okay if people are assholes because we can figure it out, guys. Like, that's stupid. No, like, we can always tell people stop being assholes, but my point is that that's not a very effective strategy. Just telling people to like not be mean. We have to actually like design systems in the game in a way where people aren't going to be that way. For example, if there's a system where right as you're about to turn in a quest, someone can kill you and take the quest from you, does anybody in chat here think that nobody will exploit that? Like, does anybody in chat think that if something like that, you could just like snag somebody's quest at the very end? Do you think people wouldn't like steal the quest from people? Like, are you going to be confused when that happens? Are you going to be like, wow, people are so mean. How could they do this? It's like, come on, guys. We've studied psychology long enough at this point, even in like your high school, you know, college courses, you've taken a 101 class. Like, you know that like, it's not enough to tell somebody not to do something just by being like, you can't do it. If they have not only the ability to do it, but an incentive to do it, you don't think they're going to do it? Even if it's risky? Thank you for the content I enjoy. Sub, it never shows up for me. Oh, yeah. Well, sorry about that. Welcome to the Nor Club. And let me grab my fedora. Upward over here. There you go. Also, I forgot to say thank you to Kill Like a Sir for subscribing with Twitch Prime. as well as Apox Sork also subscribed again. Just a regular subscription. And then thank you, Huel, for the Twitch Prime subscription. It's a deception, that's the issue. I read that as well. And Huel donated 100 bits 37 minutes ago as well. So I'm a little bit behind. Here are some tips for you guys. Shut the podcast down. On hat. My knife almost fell. Sorry. It's got a holder. Great video on Death of a Game Crucible. Thank you, Ragnar. I appreciate it. Cold War is so fun. The only problem is the lack of maps. I totally agree, Ravenel. The lack of maps is, honestly, it is a bit of a problem. Like, it's the only thing that makes me tired of playing Cold War right now. Like, I don't get tired of playing the game. Like, I have so much fun just playing the game and grinding it. But what makes me a little bit annoyed is when I'm playing Hardpoint and I keep getting the same annoying maps. And I'm kind of like, all right, like, I could take this map once, but twice whenever you're getting shut out on Hardpoint, it's like, I'm not going to play Hardpoint. I'm just going to play Control, or I'm just going to play, like, Search and Destroy or whatever. Yeah, it needs some of the old maps at least. At the very least, at least give us the old maps. Battlefield greater than COD, Milsims greater than those two. I mean, if having a realistic shooter is what you're interested in, but I don't know. For me, I don't understand, like, that is the over desire to have a super realistic shooter just because I come from a state and a place where I would just shoot a real gun, basically. Like, if I wanted to actually, like, mimic real life, I could go do a little paintball mission around here led by an ex-army military, retiree or something. Or I could go do some of the people I train with. I have a bunch of ex-military. Everyone has guns here. Like, it's not hard for me to go shoot guns and go, like, have fun and go test out some military simulating stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, in real life is what I'm saying. Like, I mean, Tim Kennedy is literally a black belt and a teacher at my gym. And he has, like, a lot of history in the armed forces. Still, as far as I know, serves even as a ranger. Or served as a ranger before. So, like, we have a lot of ex-military, a lot of people like that. So I guess I'm not really looking for the military simulating aspect because of that. I know some people still are looking for that, but I've always been attracted towards more of the arcade because of that, Just because the arcade shooters are more about your, like, precision and your speed and your mechanical skill with your hands than, like, necessarily, like, shooting a gun in real life and, that kind of stuff. So, I do like Arma, and I've actually been a long time player of Arma. I've played it since the first one. I even played the old Codemasters, what was it called? I know you know the name, Limpos. Remember when Codemasters did that Operation Flashpoint? Operation Flashpoint. That was supposed to be the next Arma, if y'all remember, and it bombed. But, like, I got into that first, and then that got me into Arma. So, like, yeah, I've been in the military sim world for a while now. But I'm not as heavily into it as I used to be, I think, just because, I got old enough to get exposure to more of that stuff in real life. And just, I don't know, I guess I like the more video gamey shooters, the more game shooters, if you will. I grew up playing Halo, so I'm not a big cyborg who can jump around and 360 no-scope people exactly, but I like to play one in a video game. I'm trying to catch up to you guys in chat because y'all were saying some funny shit. I've never had 1v1s outside of ranked, not much for dueling because it's easier to counter build people. Yeah, so what I used to do, Almost Human, whenever I was first coming up in the scene, was I used to stream, and, Airho was his name. Airho and myself and Zamora and Fantaram were pretty much the only streamers early on. We were Power later on came as well. Power, and then there was at least one other streamer I'm missing. We were like the early streamers of Guild Wars. And so like a big part of Guild Wars early on, at least in my career, was actually proving myself in 1v1. So when I came into the scene, nobody took me seriously because I didn't come from WoW. So everybody was playing with the gladiators and the 17-time gladiators this season, blah, 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 gladiator, or whatever. Like, and I was like, oh, like, well, I didn't really play WoW, so I wasn't really a gladiator, you know, like, I got 2200 rating once, but that was like, my friend gave me his max level warrior account, and I just boosted arenas with him and as a holy pally, you know, so it's like, I never really had that experience. I didn't have the history, the accolades. And so when I first came into the scene, it was very much like people didn't want to play with you because they don't know who you are. And it works like that in shooters too. If you've ever tried to be competitive in a shooter, if you don't come from another shooter with a history, a lot of the time people will just kind of ignore you and be like, you got to prove yourself. And so early on, my whole thing was just like, all right, well, nobody's really playing Necro competitively, so I'll play Necro. In fact, the only guy that was even playing Necro at the time was on, I always forget what their damn name is. They were a closed beta guild that's had the initials SS. They were a European clan, and they ran a Necro. It's actually where I got the idea of playing Necro. Is nobody in the NA scene was playing Necro, really, like competitively. Yeah, it was, I can't remember what SS was. It's not Stealing Society was the name of that clan in Guild Wars 1, but that's not this clan. This clan was called something different. It wasn't Stealing Society, it was I can't remember their fucking name, but anyway, they were like this basically an all-star clan of like closed beta guys who all joined up together and were smashing people to start off. So anyway, I got into the game, and when I first started playing, I realized, like, you know what? Nobody really knows who I am. So when I first started streaming, non-ironically, I had people come in and just be like, who the fuck are you? Like, fuck you. Like, even just like, without me saying anything. So it almost became like antagonistic towards me, where I started to take it like a challenge. So I was like, all right, you guys don't like me for some random reason? Okay. Especially after I got sponsored. Then people hated me literally for no reason at all. I guess just because of jealousy or something. I honestly still to this day do not know why people hated me then. I guess just because I was the first American sponsored player or whatever. But like, people were just hating on me. And so I adopted this whole mentality of like, same thing I had in martial arts, which is just like, all right, if you have a problem with me, 1v1 then. If not, then you're not allowed to say that I'm shit. So like that was basically like my rule was like in Guild Wars, I was like, all right, you're allowed to say I'm shit if you can just destroy me 1v1. Best 2 out of 3, you can destroy me. You can literally call me shit on stream. I'll just sit there and take it. It was too juicy of a proposition for people to turn down. So people started taking it. Good players even. They started taking the bet. Hey, I get to shit on this guy on his stream in front of everybody, and people get to make fun of him. Like, this is funny. Like, hell yeah, I'll shit on this guy. Well, obviously, nobody was shitting on me because they didn't know how to play the game, and I 1v1'd all the time against who would later become the championship player on Team PZ, which his name was Zeus. I don't know what he ended up changing his name to in the end, but point being is 2 of the best players in the game I got to duel against all the time, like since the beginning of the game. So that's how I got good, was just dueling the best players. And dueling them with builds that I couldn't beat. And in fact, one of the players, Zeus, like when we used to 1v1, he specifically designed his Elementalist build to beat my Necro build. And still to this day, he can probably still beat me with that build. Because it's just a better build than the build that I have. You know, it just counters it. It's just, it has to do with the stance switching, the purging of conditions. He's really good at being invuln and avoiding a lot of things like corrupt boon and feast of corruption. So it's just really good player, class matchup. But the point being is that it took him a while to be able to actually beat me. And so at first I could beat him, but it took a lot of effort. So I was learning a lot still by beating him, but it eventually got to the point where he was beating me. But I didn't take that as like, oh my god, I suck now. I took that as like, all right, I mean, he got better than me in this matchup, and this matchup favors him. So that's okay, you know? So 1v1s are like that. Like, ultimately, you could even be like, well, this is a useless matchup. We're never going to even 1v1 anyway, which is not true. We actually would have 1v1'd, and we did competitively, just because he was a splitter, and I was a backpoint capper. So meaning we were probably going to fight against each other at some point. But here's the key. I didn't have to fight against him. All I had to do was just survive. So in the duels, I was actually trying to kill him. In the fights, if I were to fight someone like that in a real match, I would just try to stay alive as long as I could. Because remember, I'm trying to win the game, not trying to win the fight. So that's where it's different in a 1v1 situation, is you're thinking, I need to kill this guy, otherwise I lose, because he kills me. But in a team fight, I'm thinking, all I need to do is just waste this guy's time. Because once he realizes it's not worth his time, he's going to waste even more time to try to get back and make a decision to go somewhere else. It gets twice as good when you watch him play ESO PvP and he just deletes people, and he clearly thought Guild Wars 2 would be the same. Oh, so he thought it was going to be like you could get a big, powerful gear score and then just like champion point crutch people, basically. That makes sense. He's running Axe, Warhorn, Greatsword, so he's trying to do that little combo build where you switch to your other ability, then you pop your burst, and then do your big attack or whatever. Is that the build he's trying to do? The comment was, why to devs are not open in their development anymore. Yeah, I figured. I think the idiots are the loudest online. Probably. That's why you have to be careful about letting them design your game. Or dictate what your game is. Is it old if it's still being developed? You mean like Dwarf Fortress? I think there was a long time period where it wasn't being developed, and then they like started developing it again or something like that, or maybe that's just how it came across. Lots of us cannot go out and shoot real guns, yeah, which is why I'm saying, from my perspective, I've pretty much always been around guns since I was young, so that's why a military sim is not that interesting to me. Just, you know, just like a fighting game sim isn't it that interesting to me, because I can actually go do martial arts, you know, it's just, I think it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure if there was a mechanic game, you know, Olympos wouldn't find it as fun either, because he'd realize that it's probably wrong in a lot of respects. Why do you want to also do your job as your work? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, maybe you do want that game, Olympos, but you don't strike me as the person who would want to play the mechanic game, is all I'm saying. My problem with mil sims is the populated servers are hard to get into due to reserved slots. You get enough at work, exactly. And that's kind of how I feel about fighting in general. Like, when I'm out and about, I don't want tough guy mentality around me. I don't even want it anywhere near me. I'm like chill guy mentality. I'm like leave me alone mentality. You know, because the tough guy mentality I can save for when I'm getting beat up in the gym. The first Operation Flashpoint in X-Pac was made by Bohemia, which was a really good game. And then Codemaster was the publisher. And then they made the second game, right? And that one failed epically. So that's how Bohemia is involved in this whole picture. I was wondering, why was Operation Flashpoint so closely linked to Arma? I couldn't remember. But yeah, thanks for reminding me, Fragfeast. I'm glad that you're able to do that, Limpos. I actually find it difficult to just play things for enjoyment these days, which is why it's been fun playing COD. It's like I have a game to play again that's like I can actually have fun with and enjoy on a more kind of not casual basis, because I'm definitely playing like as hard as I can play, but I mean casual in the sense that it's not like I'm not like, what video am I going to make out of this, you know? I'm just playing it to play it. Chill is the bane of an Ellie's existence, so it probably was giving him a... Yeah, early on, I specifically... Well, we made a pact not to ruin or counter each other's builds, because when I started to build, like, chill shit, he started to build, like, anti-poison and bleed shit, and then it was like, okay, well... I kind of need my bleeds and my poison as a necro. Maybe you guys don't know that, but it's probably, back then, was the strongest condition by far. The strongest condition. These days... Especially since the updates. In my opinion, it's still not even close that it's Burning, Confusion, and Torment. And Torment is the best. Like, by far is the best. But the other ones are right there. Confusion and Burning are amazing as well. And, like, those 3 conditions, if you can spread those in this game, whatever class you play, consistently, you're going to kill people. Guild Wars 2, by the way, guys. To go back to Guild Wars 2 talk, because I know we talked about COD and then we started talking about ESO. Not a huge fan of Confusion or Torment, like as a mechanic, because I will agree I don't like it as a mechanic, but here's why. I don't like it because those used to be abilities that were cast in Guild Wars 1. Well, you know that, Pin0. You played Guild Wars 1. I dislike them because they basically took it as an ability and made it a mechanic. And I guess I preferred when they were an ability more so. That way it wasn't so wide-sprung. Like, everybody has an ability to torment you. Everybody can cast Confusion. Like, it was cool before when it was just like, just the Mesmer could put empathy on you, which would, or put backfire on you, or interrupt your spells more so than, like, maybe the Ranger could kind of interrupt a little bit too, but it was more, like, class unique. The reason why I think they went away from that is because they went away from the Holy Trinity. And I know people have been beating up on Guild Wars for that decision for a while, but it kind of does come back to that. Like, when you don't have a Holy Trinity, you need classes to be more self-sufficient, in my opinion. Yeah, that Torment Revenant build, I mean, the first time I got into the game and loaded up the Revenant, I remember I was playing it Power, and I was like, yeah, sorry, I just can't play anything Power in this game. It just, nothing Power in this game makes me feel the same way as the conditions in this game. I guess I just like spreading disease. Wow, really bad joke for the time, especially. Torment Revenant was indeed terrifying, and definitely as terrifying maybe, or hopefully not as terrifying as the worldwide fucking pandemic. That being said, it was damn good at killing people in a video game, alright? In a video game. The reason why I like the Torment Revenant was that you could also combine it with a Burning Revenant. And I still have my build, and I loaded it up, and it still is a build that largely, when you play in pugs, nobody can deal with. Because Burning and Torment are so hard to get rid of, because even if you cleanse them, it's not hard to put them back on somebody. Because it's not like the same as Bleeds and Poison. Bleeds, Poison, Vulnerability, and things like that require you to stack them on somebody, right? So Bleeds especially require you to get high bleeds, and that's why my build got nerfed so hard at one point, was because once people realized what I was doing, everybody started taking Condi removal. And then I wasn't that good anymore, and I had to switch up playing Thief. But where things are a little bit different now is that you have different conditions like Torment and more Confusion, and then also Burning, which are a lot more viable to make you faster DPS in conditions. So although I can kind of see what you're saying, I kind of like that it also made the Necro a little bit more dynamic, but at the same time, people would argue that that also maybe overturned it in some respects. But who knows? I forgot Backfire and Empathy was straight cancer. Yeah, the thing about Guild Wars 1 is it was my first like Western game, like online game, because so it goes like this, like I played Dark Eden first. That was a Korean/Japanese game. And then I played after that Habbo Hotel, which was at the time UK servers. I believe the company that makes it is Swedish, or they had a Swedish server. So I don't know if they're Swedish, but they're definitely not American. Hasbro. No. They were owned and bought out by Hasbro or some shit. Wasn't it? Isn't it something funny like that? Like some big conglomerate bought them out, and it's actually like a toy company? I can't remember. Anyway, Sioux Lake Entertainment, or whatever the hell their name was before they got acquired, because I don't think they're called Sioux Lake anymore, is my point. That was one of the first online games I played. But the first like Western game I played was probably Guild Wars 1. So it's why I remember so much of that stuff, is that Guild Wars 1 was when I first even learned what like PvP really was, you know? Like it was the first time I even learned about like meta and tactics and like things like that. So like it really was like a big catalyst for me. A great game. Confusion is absolutely disproportionate on some classes, Pin0. It's why whenever I play against warriors, I stack Confusion, is because I used to kill them all the time whenever people would use that OPS 100 blades build, I would put confusion on them and literally watch them kill themselves. That was like one of my favorite things to do. Isn't Star Wars Western? The thing is, though, is that I played Dark Eden in like 2001. I played Habbo Hotel in like 03 or 04. So those are before Star Wars was even out. I didn't play Star Wars until maybe 05 or somewhere around there. So by then I had already played Guild Wars 1. I couldn't play Galaxies because it required a better graphics card than Guild Wars 1 did. So yeah, technically I played Guild Wars 1 first, even though I played... I mean, it's hard to say which one I played more, if I'm being honest. I played them both like thousands of hours, but I never tracked it, you know? And I also like was super addicted to games as a kid, so I couldn't even possibly tell you how much I played, but I used to play like... With StarCraft, I could tell you I at least put in like 5,000 hours, at least. At least StarCraft 1. And I'm still not even that good at it, which is like hilarious. Like... and embarrassing, but I just played custom games, to be fair, okay? And I was like a kid, so. I had so much stuff in Star Wars Galaxies when I reformatted my PC, I somehow lost everything in my inventory except the new class gear. Dude, my first MMORPG ever was Tibia. It was great back in the day, and it's still around, but I bet it has aged poorly. The gameplay was so slow and grindy. Yeah, StarCraft was like my addiction game. My first addiction game. Like, it was the first game that I was like legitimately addicted to. And then after that, it probably was Guild Wars 1. Or no, sorry, Habbo, Guild Wars 1, Galaxies. And Warhammer. And I think I started kind of... not being as... I didn't have as many problems with addiction after that, regards to video games, partly because I was in a better, like, living situation, but also partly because I was doing more, like, sports instead of just, like, martial arts. So I was doing more, like, standard extracurricular activities and stuff. That was basically me with Warcraft, thousands of hours, 99% was custom games. Yeah, it's funny because like my friends would be like, yeah, but haven't you played StarCraft 1 for like 15 years or some shit? And I'd be like, yeah, but it doesn't mean I'm good. Like, I was getting shit on back then too. Like, I'm talking like iCup League and stuff. Like, I'm sure like standard rank ladder I would do okay, but like, because I'm not terrible and I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm just saying like relative to how much hours I put in, I'm not that good. I'm pretty bad. Like, Guild Wars 1 was one of my first online games. How I miss it. Yeah. Great game. And I think it's why I get a little bit butthurt about Guild Wars 2, if I'm being honest. Like, you gotta understand, Guild Wars 1 was like my baby. I was like in love with that game. And I think that's why, like, if people just give me a chance to explain myself and maybe get to know me a little bit, as my buttons keep trying to like unpop right here for some reason, and no, you guys are not getting those to unpop. Like, I think they'll understand that I'm on your side. Like, I'm probably a bigger Guild Wars fan than you are. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, just because I can hate on Guild Wars 2 doesn't mean I'm not a fan. And it doesn't mean I'm not a huge fan of the franchise. I'm probably one of the biggest fans of the franchise. On YouTube right now, in terms of like journalists, video game, you know, YouTubers you follow, name one that's a bigger Guild Wars 1 fan than me. Seriously, like, who the hell comes to mind as a bigger Guild Wars 1 fan than me? I could tell you all the builds still. I even know the names of the abilities still. Like, I could even tell you the counters to the builds. Like, yeah, Guild Wars 1 was one of my favorites. And it's just, I make that point because it's like, weirdly, almost like nobody in the big, like, public space of entertainment, like, really covered it or played it that much, you know? Like, you think about all the MMO YouTubers and not a lot of them played Guild Wars 1. And you could argue that's because it's older, but I think it's just partly because it also was like, it was niche back then. You know? Which is funny to think about. Really funny to think about in hindsight. But yeah, back then, like, Guild Wars 1 was like the weird game. You know? Like, it was considered at first like kind of like the, what is this game over here? This game's doing weird shit over here. Like, oh, let's go check it out, you know? It was that game. And then it became the popular game over time. And quickly too, don't get me wrong. Like, it sold well relatively quickly. Especially with their expansions, but like, it's just funny in hindsight when you think about stuff like that, that Guild Wars 1 used to be the weird game, and now I'm like, looking back and I'm like, huh, it's like, how things have changed so much. Like, it's not even that it's weird today, because it's weird in some respects, but it's almost like it's so far ahead in certain other respects. Like, its PvP systems are so far ahead of other games, it is shocking to me. Like, I'm so impressed by Guild Wars 1 even today. Otherwise, I'll keep talking about Guild Wars 1 endlessly, though. I gotta move on. I have a single friend who's a really big fan of Guild Wars 1, and she still plays the heck out of that game. That's awesome. I feel like that's common. Most people I've bumped into in Guild Wars 2 never played Guild Wars 1. But those not into Guild Wars 2 played Guild Wars 1. Oh, you mean like actively not into it? There's probably some truth to that. Like little sour grapes, for sure. The more I play Guild Wars 2, the more I enjoy it, but the end content is pretty dry at the moment. The new Fractal was fun, at least. Yeah, like, piecemeal content like that has never really interested me. I just wish they would open up more of their PvP systems. Because I think that the PvP combat in Guild Wars 2 is awesome. I would also love to see more hybrid zones in the expansion, but I don't know how realistic that is at this point. What if they came out with a new expansion with GVG? I would, like, cry on stream. Like, I would just start crying. Like, because I would never see it coming first off. But I would just be like, wow. Yeah, what if they brought the monk back and gave us GVG, AV8s? Or 6v6s at least. Something like that. I'd be like, man, that'd be sick. Anyway. I'm not going to talk about shoulda, coulda, wouldas, because then I'll get too excited about Guild Wars 2's expansion. I know it has been zero, and that's a shame to me. That's a shame. Don't forget about alliances, because they sure did. Yeah, remember when AVA was a thing? Dude, Guild Wars 1 was the king of acronyms. You had GVG, you had HVH, you had RVR, you had TVT, or no, you had TA, you had RA, a TA, RA, you had HOM, you had what else did I miss? I already said AVA. Did I say GVG already? GVG. Like, it was just like acronym after acronym after acronym because they had so many different modes that you could play PvP in. You know? I could see the Ritualist as well, Alondras, especially because there's some flavor abilities in Guild Wars 2 that already kind of remind me of the Ritualist. Did I play WildStar PvP? Yeah, I was a alpha tester. I don't know if we called it closed alpha or closed beta at the time, but I was in the guild test for WildStar, which was the earliest that anybody had tested the game outside of the developers. So, to answer your question, not only was I involved in it, I was trying to provide feedback about the war plots and the arenas. And look, alright, y'all can't tell anybody about this, alright? This is a secret. Like, this isn't being broadcasted live or anything. I might have been the reason why the Spellslinger was kind of OP. Because I kind of knew it was OP, and I didn't really tell anybody. Not gonna lie. I'm sorry. I'm probably the reason why the Spellslinger was so OP in WildStar. Because I definitely could have helped made it not so OP. It's just like my mentality was different back then, okay? I was way more selfish. Like, back then I was like, Spellslinger's really good. I'm gonna keep this a secret so I can just shit on everyone in Arena, you know? Like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna, hey, Spellslinger's OP, guys, you should change it. Yeah, no, I was a selfish bastard, okay? Thank you for making sure I had a good time with my Spellslinger. I was a stalker of the unkillable variety. I like the stalker too. You know, obviously I've shit on the game's combat because of the whole Dance Dance Revolution aspects and how it ruined the performance of the game and severely impacted the performance of the raids even and the war plots. I actually loved the flow of WildStar's PvP. It really had that action MMO feel to it, you know, where especially like the Spellslinger, like you had to aim your abilities and your snipes, and like if you could land those, it really felt like you landed it, you know? And if you got on somebody's back and you could hit them with a stalker, you really felt like you could take advantage of the fact that they couldn't see you and they had poor movement. And so WildStar had a lot going for it that was good for sure. Ellie Spellslinger, Elite Spec for Cantha. Do it, ain't it? Huh. I mean, that'd be pretty sick. How come they haven't done something like that? Maybe it's like hard to do like animations and like particle effects wise or something.
Brother, man. I play these games for small scale PvP. If
Yeah,
I
that's
cannot
small-scale
1v1,
PvP.
I'm good. You know what I'm saying?
You can easily like 2v2 or like 2v1 or anything.
Listen,
like
it's kind of like, I can't explain it to you, alright?
Can you send me the other
like
video, or do I have to scroll
how
up and fucking
PvE
go back
sits
and
on
find
the pillar
it?
of PvP. My PvP pillar sits on top of another pillar, which is 1v1 capabilities, and if I fucking suck dick at it, I'm over it. Or if it's not a 1v1 game and it's just a Zerg fest, I'm not down with it. I like 1v1s, dude. You know what I'm saying?
Me too, man.
I mean, I think you do good in 2v2
So,
though. Like you're getting 1v1s, but like if it's a matchup, if you run into a matchup,
I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry, bro.
You see him, he as soon as he starts to logically explain it to him, and this is exactly my experience with Summit, by the way, is you see him start to like deny, and be like, no, I'm not actually, no, what you're saying doesn't apply. When it's like, whenever I had the best ranked player join my lobby after, wait, is that the old one? Is that the other video or is that a different one? That how many times you have to learn this lesson, old man, is always a classic, dude. That's like a goat, man. That's a goat one. Well, Card, if you want a game to play that's mindless, fun, but also has a technical element to it, if you want it, I really recommend Cold War. And I'm not trying to like make Activision richer or anything necessarily. Like I don't feel good about that aspect. I'm just saying, if you guys are starved for any kind of shooter, period, right now, like I am, and you've liked COD in the past, like the old CODs, like from 1 through like Modern Warfare 2, and then also you maybe liked kind of games of like 2004, 2005 shooters, like those kinds of vibes, like the more in your face, like challenging. I feel like, not in your face challenging, but just in your face in terms of gunfights. I feel like it really satisfies those things. And it also has big modes as well, where you can fly vehicles and drive tanks around. It's not Battlefield, but it's at least got something there, you know? This is another one. So he 1v1s his friend in this video too? Because it looks like the fight is the same. Yeah, here he's making all the same moves, so this is the same fight. Just looks like it's like a longer video of him being angry. So did he really only PvP once in a 1v1 then quit? Because that would be hilariously ironic if it was, like... Because then it would have proved his exact point, actually, which is like, the other guy was saying you don't even do it. If he literally did it one time, that would kind of prove his point. Oh, damn it. I have to give you... Wait. Rip. He permitted you, but then it... but then it banned it anyway. I hope you're not timed out now. Oh, it was only 5 seconds. There you go. Alright, get your questions in, by the way, guys, if y'all have any. Hey, it's not working. Is YouTube like not working again? Because like that was happening earlier in the week. Did you guys experience that too? Where like YouTube just literally stopped working?
God. It's always bitch classes somewhere, bro. I just don't understand how you play like that. I am fucking ultra over it, bro. That's insane.
He's playing solo, not communicating with his team as well, and he's not playing the objective.
Man, just look at this. Just look at this stupid fucking center. What a fucking joke!
We should make a series where I just react to like regular streamers playing MMOs. I feel like we could make a fucking series out of it, dude. Because like this is gonna be my reactions. I'm always gonna be ruthless, guys, because they don't actually care about the MMOs. They just cover it basically because it's popular and people tell them to cover it. So I'm not saying that they have bad intentions, but that's kind of why I don't mind being teasing them about it.
I think the dream's dead with MMOs. Period. These stupid games, man.
It's not hitting. Next.
Just let everybody get their fucking cooldowns out of the way, because everybody's a goddamn yeah, I'm over this shit.
Everyone's a what?
Oh boy. Alright, boys. I'm out. I've had enough of this. I'm Gucci.
Look, he's using
Listen, dudes, good luck with the game.
He's using that build website, and then he literally is just looking up builds online and just using whatever builds like people give to him and stuff. Like, I don't understand what the appeal of that is, if I'm being honest. Like playing random shit and then getting all frustrated about it. It just seems like you didn't have the right mentality going in, you know, if you thought it was going to be that easy. The problem is that he sees an MMO has a lobby PvP match. Ah, I see. So then he just like signs up for it thinking it's kind of like he's playing pug matches in CSGO or something. The dream died, guys. Let's pack it up. Yeah, no, do you guys remember whenever Kripparrian got banned from Guild Wars as well? Then he went on to start complaining about MMOs and how they're not that good. I'm just saying, it's like, it's something I notice a lot with these kind of high profile streamers. They'll just like really shit on a game out of pure ignorance or because they don't have the ability to adapt. And like, it's one thing to not like a genre. It's another thing to not like a game. I literally have just told you guys I don't like a lot of these, you know, games that we talk about personally. But like, I can understand what they're trying to accomplish, and just because I'm not good at it doesn't mean that it's not a good game, right? But I feel like a lot of people, especially like these very, entitled, like popular streamers, can have a bit of that mentality where it has to be fun for them because they have to play like 20 hours a day, you know, to stream. So like, I get that. Like, you're not thinking like, well, I don't want to grind for like 8 hours to learn how to get better at this game when I'm already going to be streaming. So like, I just want to have fun, which is cool, but I just don't understand why people like that end up getting attracted to MMOs in the first place, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Probably because the industry got co-opted by people who don't even like the kind of games that are made in it. It was because he exploited some karma. Yeah, he basically did an exploit and even admitted it. And when he got his levels taken away for it and his money, and he had to re-level his character, he quit, basically. He quit the game. So it's just like, you know, fair enough, like whatever, it's your content. It was entertaining, people liked it, but at the time, whenever Crip came into the scene, we didn't really like Crip that much, if I'm being honest. We didn't like him because he came in and he was just shitting on the game. Meanwhile, a small, like little, you know, Guild Wars YouTubers were trying to like put the game up, you know what I'm saying? Oh, he was hard banned? I thought he like quit because he had to make his character again or some shit. Lol. Yeah, he literally got banned and he cried and complained about it. And so it's just like, ugh, I don't know. Look, I guess I have to be the guy to like talk about this shit. Look, I cannot stand drama, guys, but MMOs are my favorite genre. So yeah, when people come into them and they kind of get a little bit culture vulture-y, your boy does get a little bit heated. I can't deny. Play the video again. All right. Keep it going. All right. What do we got?
I hate this game. Oh, I suck. Summit, you just gotta remember stuff, bro. It's like I get up, I don't even know what my main fucking attacks are.
It is APOC, and I'm glad that you see it like that. I think you and I have a similar perspective in that way, in that you ultimately can't take it that seriously. And so like I can shit talk people in a video game because I don't take it that seriously.
Suck my beer! This chick, she's gonna
but
kill me, bro! She
maybe a
killed
bully
me!
mentality will think they should just be bullying somebody. When they can't bully somebody, then it's not fun for them anymore. And clearly bullying is not the same as poking fun, especially at somebody who, in this case, is kind of bringing it upon themselves, right?
You bitch! You bitch!
So why didn't he just get up there and kill her? Like out of curiosity.
Bitch! You bitch!
Yeah, no, Pin Zero, I just say that because sometimes I have to remember that I came up in the age of the internet where like we yelled profanities at each other all the time, like mid-match after each kill. And obviously we've civilized a little bit since then, but just like largely that's like the mentality. I find that fun and hilarious. Like when I watch like low tier God, like in the fighting game community, I think it's fucking hilarious. Like, I find all of that entertaining. So this is just entertaining for me.
You bitch! You bitch!
Hey, you should try playing Final Fantasy.
Sanjuro, it's a big reason why I don't find that game fun unless I play with my friends. I've never experienced it in any other game besides League. Players intentionally wanting to lose more. Like, that game literally makes people depressed, bro. Like, I don't know what it does to people, but it just makes them want to not win. Like, I've had teammates where we're winning, not want to win. I mean, like, we're literally winning the game. Like, we're shitting on them. Surrender votes. Game's over. Like, screw this game, because they died twice. And it's just like, when I go and play Cold War, oh my, it's so refreshing. Everybody's trying to win. Especially in, like, Search and Destroy, everybody's trying to win. I love playing games where everybody's trying to win. Is that too much to ask? That's my problem with League, man. It's like some people just don't even want to win. Like, I'm one of those players where I don't care if my score is 0 and 500 as long as I win. You know, meaning like if I'm 500 of those deaths are going exactly towards like helping the team and I actually am contributing, which is not really going to happen with 500 deaths, but just bear with my exaggerated example, then I would still see it as like, hey, I did my part, right? So maybe, and less exaggerated example, if I go 5 and 11, not the best score, but maybe I had 20 assists, and maybe I set up the Baron play to win the game or something. You know what I mean? Maybe they won a game without respawns. I feel like it's an issue with how long the game has been around. I think that has something to do with it. Yeah, Lundris, sorry, I should specify. When I'm talking about trying to win, I'm talking about whenever you're playing a search and destroy match, you're typically going to have people who are more trying to win. Same thing with control. Now, if I just load up like random lobbies, hardpoint, domination, kill confirmed, escort, shit, anything not the 2 game modes I just mentioned, most of it is like that. But that's because that's just pug games. League pug games equivalent is the same way. Ranked equivalent in League for COD would be, there is no equivalent. So technically it would be game battles. Game battles is the entry basic competitive level in COD usually. They said that they're bringing a ranked playlist into the game. It's not in the game yet for some bizarre reason. So maybe we will get it at some point, but as it stands right now, yeah. I guess my point is people are more willing to see stuff to the bitter end when they aren't as knowledgeable. I don't know though. I really want to do a study on this, honestly. Like, because like I've looked at so many games where I'm almost like 99% sure the game is losable, and nobody wants to surrender. And I've just always wondered, like, how come in like Korea people are willing to surrender, in other regions they're willing to surrender, but how come in my region people will just play to like 40 minutes in, 40-5, like they're not even close to having a chance to winning, but they still keep playing. I think it's an American mentality specifically, but not just unique to Americans. Like, I'm just saying, like, in my experience on American servers versus like Korean and Japanese servers, and I've played on many other servers, it seems to be like a very unique American thing to not want to surrender. I don't know, maybe it's like a pride thing, or like, never surrender, my honor is at stake, or some shit. I have fucking no clue, but like, in chess, and that's kind of the first competitive game I really played, you lose all the time. Like, sometimes in a tournament, you might even lose like 10 plus times and still win the tournament. So it's, I have a little bit different of a mentality in that I come from bracket mentality, tournament mentality, where you're pretty much always going to lose more than one game. Like, it's going to be not best of one, is my point. It's going to be best of 2, best of 3, best of 5, best of 7. You're going to have to play a bunch of games. And so I think best of 1 mentality in League also contributes to that a little bit. Because people are just like, I'm not going to surrender because it's my only game to prove myself here. When it's like, what if we had to play 2 more games after that to see who the best of that was? You don't think people would be willing to surrender faster so they can get on to the next game? Of course they would. That happens in the competitive scene. I think League and MOBAs in general should have never had ranked solo queue. They're a team game, but a lot of people go into that with such an individualistic mentality. You think that that's a large reason why it caused a lot of that toxicity? Probably, right? Honestly, when we're getting shit on and someone on my team is really toxic, I just don't want to surrender because I want him to lose this time, like a revenge. I guess you lose anyway when you surrender, though. So I guess that's why I don't understand it personally, because like I respect your opinion, Pleoplek, but for me personally, I wouldn't want to waste my own time. You know what I'm saying? So if you thought it was worth wasting your time to annoy somebody, do you think I think I'm above that? I literally grew up on the internet, like the age of trolling on the internet. You know, like I even still troll people. I'm just not like the blatant troll I used to be. So like I definitely think there's a certain level of like, when somebody tells me, if somebody says anything else, I'm gonna start feeding or surrender. I'm not gonna lie. I'm the guy that says something every time. Because you're not going to hold me hostage, bro, in a video game. Like, I'd rather take the L. I'd rather lose the LP than be held hostage by somebody. You know, like, you guys ever have that kind of person where they're like, if you're not nice to me right now, I'm going to start feeding, and then you're going to lose. Like, when you're winning even, or maybe not even, like, of course, we've all had that kind of person. That person, for me, doesn't work. Because I'm willing to lose if I have you on my team. Like, if you want to be that person, then yes, I will give you what you want. You want to lose, you can lose. Cool. I don't think people realize, but they keep going, essentially banking on the off chance that the other team will throw. Go to late game is a special animal. If you can make it to the late game, all the advantage you had early and mid game is thrown out the window. Exactly, Limboss. You're one of those people that has 3 lanes losing, won't click yes, and then says GG jungle difference. I had a friend who got reported by that guy for calling him out and got global mooted in LOL. I used to have a friend who literally trolled people like that. I had a friend who was one of my Korean friends, actually, Asai. A long time no see, by the way, buddy. But he used to be my pocket healer in pretty much every MMO I played. I haven't seen him in forever. If anyone finds like a stranded Korean MMO player, please send him my direction. I need another amazing pocket healer who was also a good friend. But he was really funny when he played League with me because obviously, you know, as you can probably expect, he was pretty good at the game. But he was one of those players who didn't find much enjoyment in really winning. Like, what it was fun to him was doing it in an interesting way. So like, he was the kind of guy where like, if we had a guy on our team who was just like raging and trying to like shit on everyone or hold people hostage, he wouldn't even be mean to that guy. he would just like needle in little like funny ways. Like one of his favorite things to do back before ranked play was his common, and everybody was playing normal normal blind pick. He would just exactly troll the toxic player. Basically, what he would do is he would say, so if the player was playing Ashe and Ashe on the other team was doing really well, and Ashe on our team was feeding, he'd tell the other Ashe to stop feeding, and that his Ashe was doing really well, or vice versa. And like, as stupid as that sounds, 100% would work in tilting people. Like, it was like so stupid that it worked. Like, I never, his ways to troll people worked like in ways that I was always like, what? How does this work? Like, again, Korean guy, he would make this joke all the time. He would say, sorry, like, I have bad England. Like, he would always make that joke. And non-ironically, people would start being racist towards him and yelling at him and being angry and stuff. Just because he joked that he couldn't speak English. So, like, he was just that kind of troll. Like, he wanted to out racists. He wanted to out trolls. He wanted to out bullies. Like, he found it almost more fun to, like, mess with annoying people than to play the game. But he was a good player. Make no mistake. In fact, he was the first player I knew that made it very popular to out-of-party heal in Warhammer Online. So, yeah, in Warhammer Online, he used to out-of-group heal, which was like a little cheat code to get like a lot of experience. And he got to level 40 doing that like really quickly, like faster than anybody had, and was climbing rank renown until they banned it, basically. They started saying, like, you're not allowed to do that, it's against the rules. Oh no, I always want to win, but when someone is really toxic and annoying, I just want him to waste his time. It's dumb, but it's kind of a relief. No, I mean, I can relate to it in a certain extent. I guess from my perspective, I can only ever relate to it when it's been those times where you're playing that game and like someone's purposely not letting the game end. Then I might just go do something else. Yeah, I've definitely done that before. That's true. Support Pantheon is more of a thing now. And you're also going to laugh, Pin Zero, but he used to play support Pantheon. So I don't know how the hell you knew that, or you were just guessing. But that's really fucking funny that you knew what class he, or what guy he played. Because back then we didn't have normal bot lane. And so we used to play Xin Zhao Pantheon bot all the time. And just make people rage quit. Because, you know, the whole point of the build was to just all in people. Oh, you used to play... So are you Korean, Pin Zero? No, I'm just kidding. 안녕하세요. 안녕하세요. 조금요? 조금요? Fuck, what are my other Korean words? I know a couple other ones. You can't put me on the spot like that, guys. I'm learning too many languages right now. Damn it. I know another greeting. Manga hapsam, manga hapsamnida, manga hapsamnida, manga hapsamnida, manga hapsamnida. I don't remember what that means, but I remember it in my Pimsleur. Manga hapsamnida. That's all I can give you guys. 안녕하세요, and manga hapsamnida, and 조금요. I know, more than 2 languages is too much for me. My pea brain can't imagine the people who know like 3 or 4 since they were a kid. You guys are like a different level. And I had a lot of friends like that too, where like, especially like a lot of my Danish friends actually. Like it was always like my Danish friends knew like multiple languages. So it was always just like, clearly you guys had more exposure to like learning and know a lot more languages, that's for sure. English is your third, Sion? It's impressive, man. Yeah, I used to get really annoyed whenever people would be like, "Hey, speak English." I'd be like, "Bro, it's like his fifth English. Or it's like his 5th language. Sorry, he can't speak his 5th language as good as you can speak your 1st." You know, like I was one of those guys. Don't worry, I was your ally online. I was always defending those people because I grew up in an ESL neighborhood. So even though I'm American and white-skinned, I'm Hispanic. So the neighborhood I grew up in, I was used to people not being able to speak English that well. So I was usually kind of like the translator. I would kind of say what they were saying or what they were trying to say, and like explain things. I think it's how I got good at explaining things, if I'm being honest, was kind of being in that environment where I had to always kind of explain my perspective in a way where somebody who didn't speak English could understand. And that made me also very used to talking to people online who didn't speak English that well. And so I could even tell when people weren't native English speakers, even by the way that they type. You know, I got good at that after a while, because you could just notice, oh, they make a lot of the same kind of even typing patterns. Like, English is my second and third. That difficult, right? You want to eventually learn 3. It's easier to learn languages as a kid. English is my second language, and I feel like I haven't made progress since elementary school. Yeah, a big part of why I couldn't learn languages was because of my, basically my mental problems. I, have PTSD, which manifests its way in many ways of, like ADD. So like having deficit disorders, I can't focus on things. I can't take in written instruction that well. I've talked about it before. So for me, it wasn't until I discovered things like Pimsleur and YouTube, like languages, that I was like, whoa, I could actually learn languages now. Like the other method of like textbook learning was really bad for me. Like I didn't learn very well that way. In fact, it would constantly highlight how bad I was at that kind of learning. And so I think it frustrated me constantly, and I always felt insecure. But then I kind of realized, well, we don't all learn the same way. And I learn a little bit better when I hear people talking. And that's kind of how I learned Spanish, was just like, you hear people just speaking it. And that's probably why I'm better at understanding and reading it than I am speaking it, right? When I speak about it, I have to think about it. And that's not natural, right? It means I have to like put myself back into my Spanish brain, compared to somebody who's more fluent, can actually just think naturally in both even sometimes. And not all words translate, for sure. And the tempo is also different, and the direction of the words, or rather the order of the words, is different as well. But obviously, if you're fluent enough, you can still think in that language, and you're just thinking in languages. You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't that interesting to think about, thinking in languages? Yeah, at the moment right now, my goals, if you're curious about languages, are finish learning Spanish, because I felt like I had a good enough understanding of it to survive here in America, but wanting to move to Spain, their Spanish is a lot more proper than mine, because I speak a lot of Spanglish here, being from the South. We speak a lot of like, 1 second you're saying hablo español, next thing you're saying a little bit, you're not even saying it all in Spanish. That's very common here in Texas, especially on the border. So I'm trying to refine my Spanish a lot more. So I've been actually trying to practice with canción, with songs and bailar, and little bit of cantar as well. Bailar, cantar. That kind of stuff makes it more fun for me personally. So that's why I like to learn. I don't know about you guys. How have y'all learned languages in your past? Did you just talk to your friends? Learn through exposure, like because you live in Europe, so you have like, can you not bite yourself while I'm streaming, please? They probably can hear you. Yeah, they probably hear you biting your butt. My little pup's back here. She's just chilling. Yeah, at this point, Scion, I'm probably moving to Spain, because long story short, without having to go over shit I've already talked about, I'm a Sephardic Jew, which means that I am Portuguese distant, but more so Spanish ancestry. In fact, my great-grandma's family is from Spain. So essentially, my family, as far as like trackable records, is more Spanish than I can find native. But that's very common, because the natives wouldn't have had as much records of it. But anyway, yeah, so that means that I'm from the border, which to me is basically Mexico. So that's why, like, I tell people I've been to Mexico. What the fuck? I thought she totally killed my computer. She walked right by and pulled the cable to one of my monitors, and it all shut down at the same time. And then it came right back up, and I was like, you bastard. And she did it like softly too. She was like, and then was like looking at me like, "Nah, you're good. All right, my bad, my bad. Ignore your dad. Ignore your dad." She does that anyway. Spanish is like British English. Yeah, I've been studying it for a while, so I'm pretty aware of it. But yeah, it definitely is. It's a lot more proper, and it's a big reason why my pronunciation is much different, even in normal Spanish now. Just because, for example, like whenever you say things like ciudad, 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 ciudad. Have you heard someone say that before? Ciudad, ciudad. Oh man, that's a good one. That to me is probably one of the weirdest ones. Like everyone always says Barcelona, right? But that's not that bad. It makes sense. It's like Artha, law, Artha. But ciudad to me is like sounds like you just have a lisp, basically, like a straight lisp. It doesn't sound like pronunciation to me. I'm pretty sure it's just yes. Exactly. I'm surprised you were actually able to pick up on that. Do you speak or did you just figure that out? Yeah, they're very much like there. So it's like the. It did sound remotely. Okay, well that's good. I'm glad that like y'all are able to pick up on it because to me it sounds weird. So because I'm not used to speaking with maybe people who have exposure to like Spanish from Spain, but that's funny. Really, Desktopper? No way. What? Are you really? Man, that's crazy. My family is from Tenerife. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, no, in fact, one of my ancestors, oh, you're from Gran Canaria? I don't know much about Gran Canaria, and I haven't even been to Canary Islands, but I'm trust me, that's one of the first things I'm gonna do when I go there is, but yeah, no, my family, to give a slight bit of history, my Spanish family goes back really far, like back to Ponce de Leon's, back to Castile de Leon's, like it's super far back to royal bloodline, far back. But the closer heritage in Spain is actually my Sephardic ancestry, which is basically Spanish or Iberian Peninsula Jews, because it's not just Spanish, it's also Portuguese, and I also have Portuguese family, because it's confusing. People who are from that region know already, but essentially, they got kicked out of the area. The Jews got kicked out of Spain. They went to Portugal. They also got kicked out of there, or Portugal, as it's actually pronounced. But I say it like an American sometimes. So yeah, that's crazy that you're from Canarias. Huh. I've actually thought about living there. I'm not gonna lie. Like I could just tell you, like the three places I've thought about living the most in Spain are Madrid, Barcelona, and four. Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, and Tenerife. Those are the four places. And part of it is my attraction to Tenerife is like I had a lot of family who was there before who got forcibly made to leave. That's part of it. And it's a beautiful place. And then also my family in central Spain. More like a mixture of Asturias and I guess it's kind of like not Granada. I'm thinking of the south part. What do they call it? Andalusia. So I have family from Andalusia, which makes sense because the Moors used to own Andalusia, the region, before the Spanish took over, and there was Jews living there before. They stayed living there until they were eventually kicked out. But most of the Jewish population in Spain lives in Toledo. lives in Toledo. Why am I forgetting the other place? Sevilla. That's how I would pronounce it, by the way. As a Mexican, I'm not sure how you guys pronounce it. But what else? There's one other town, but anyway, my family is from those areas basically, so I can actually find the neighborhoods my family lived in, and I even have the records from the Inquisition. Well, I don't have them yet, but I'm working with a genealogist who has them, basically. But I even have records of them being prosecuted and persecuted and attempted. Well, some of my family members, unfortunately and tragically, were killed by the Inquisition, as you can imagine, because they were Jewish. But many of them, and I recommend you guys look into this sometime, because you don't hear really many people talk about Sephardi Jews. They talk about Ashkenazi Jews. They talk about a lot of Palestinian Jews, like these other types of Jewish people. But Jews have been kicked out of their areas since the beginning of time, basically. And they were living quite well in Spain, actually, before the Christians came. And when the Christians came, they actually lived alongside them peacefully. It wasn't until they got forcibly made to leave by King Ferdinand, and then he made them all leave Portugal as well, because he wanted Isabella to marry the Portugal king. And they kicked them all out. So the reason why they ended up coming back, or rather, why am I coming back, is because Spain and Portugal realized, hey, we fucked up. We kicked out not only a lot of our own citizens, but very successful and high-ranking citizens. For example, my Portuguese ancestor was advisor and treasurer to the king of Portugal, Pedro I, which means that, can you imagine like how different everyone in my ancestry, like down the line's life would have been different if that was a position that was able to be maintained? You see what I'm saying? So it's almost like maybe they're looking at it like a bit of reparations or something. So it's like it's interesting. I don't know if it's having that intended effect exactly, if that's just the smoke screen and they're really just trying to get Jewish money back into the scene, basically. But long story short, that's how I'm becoming a Portuguese, aka European citizen. Yeah, no, I say Portugal because that's how Americans say it. But Portugal is how a Portuguese person would say it. So the pronunciation is definitely right. It's just that if I pronounce it like a Portuguese, like a Portuguese person, then Americans or basically people who can't understand the accent won't understand you as well. It's a problem I have in America too. Like I said, where I'm from is even when I talk to Hispanics sometimes, we don't even pronounce the words as correctly as we should. And it's why we get shit on a lot for our Spanish being kind of ugly, is because it just is. Like Spanish from the border of Mexico is kind of ugly. And it's because like we're poor, that's a big part of it. We have less education, for sure. But I think a part of it is just that we also don't worry about the pronunciation as much and the accents and things like that, because we're speaking largely to people who speak English and Spanish. So it's like it's something I've been learning now how to handle. It's like, do I just always pronounce things correctly, or try to? Or do I try to also take into consideration my audience and who is trying to listen to me? And that's kind of why I just keep it separate and I have subtitles, and maybe at some other point you'd have, some other language translated on the channel in like voice way, but largely, yeah, it's going to be more like I guess you would say Americanized, until I would able to do something, or I would be able to do something like that. Like for example, a good example of this to me is San Mateo. Some people would say San Mateo, right? In my video of Dead Space, I pronounced it San Mateo. I know. It's embarrassing. Trust me, I've already said embarrassing shit with pronunciation, even with Spanish. Bruh, I cringed so hard when I saw someone in the top comment making fun of it. Because I was like, I felt like a phony, guys. Like, I can't explain to you guys how it hurts me when that happened. Because I was like, I've already felt like a Spanish, like, fucking imposter my whole life. Because I mean, look at me. I'm not dark-skinned, but I'm a moreno. So I've already dealt with this, like, weird, like, you know, crisis of identity. But when I saw that, I was like, oh my god, all my Hispanic friends and my family and, like, people are gonna make fun of me. And, like, I was like, no. Anyway, that one hurt me a lot. Because I will agree with you, Dem, that, I have heard people pronounce it also, Portugal, with more of a tu, because it's less of tu, right? Because Spanish would be like tu, right? And Portuguese, Spanish aren't the same, obviously. So yeah, there's definitely some differences there. And I think, as you guys will notice in my Portuguese, it's very Spanish-y. So if I ever make any mistakes that are Spanish-y, just tell me. Tell me that it's like, for example, now. Tell me it's like, not now, but like now. Like, those little, like, differences are, like, so hard to track, but people who know the language, like, they know immediately I'm saying it wrong, you know? Well, in Portugal, well, we learn, see how I say it like gal? I say it like a Hispanic, like gal, because that's how we say things. Gal. Meanwhile, people who are actually, like, native speakers, I don't really think speak like gal. That's more of like a Mexican, like, slangy thingy, you know? I'm from the South, like, gal. Anyway, we've made fun of my pronunciation enough today. What we learned the most is how we screw so many opportunities of being a successful country through history. I also think, Fish and Storm, and this doesn't get admitted enough. I think part of the reason you guys get a lot of shit too is because y'all allied with Great Britain. And I know that sounds weird because America was a colony and stuff, but, like, while Spain was doing its own thing and also France was doing its own thing, you guys are kind of doing your own thing. And I felt like y'all aligning with Great Britain put y'all on, like, a different path from Spain, like, outright from that. And I also think that that's why America didn't accept y'all. Like, I was actually watching a documentary on this the other day, and I never thought about that. But the big reason why I don't know anything about my, you know, Portuguese, like, history is, like, because America doesn't know anything about their Portuguese history. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's so many people, like my family, who have ancestry we didn't even know about. I don't even know. I'm literally gonna be a Portuguese citizen. Like, how weird is that? Like, most of my family was born in Porto. Like, how strange is that to go back, like, 4 generations, 5 generations and be like, oh, we literally used to be European living over here, and then we moved to this new place, and my family doesn't know anything about the history. And it's because they were Jewish, basically. To put it bluntly, that's part of the reason, but there's other reasons. Like, there's more nuanced reasons, like, sometimes Americans lose their culture, sometimes this happens, sometimes that happens, but, like, long story short, my family had to go into hiding, so they changed their names. And so they don't even know that they were Spanish or Portuguese. You see what I'm saying? Like, I didn't even know. Not even my own dad knew that. Like, my dad told me when I was a kid, you're probably Spanish more than you're Mexican. And I was like, what does that mean? Is that just because I'm fair-skinned? You know, like, I didn't understand what that meant. He never told me what that was. When I went and figured it out, I was just like, this is pretty crazy. And when I met with a genealogist too, he told me, he's like, yeah, your bloodline it's literally been accepted as a Sephardic bloodline before because you were your family was persecuted by the Inquisition. So it's like, he already knew the bloodline. He already recognized it. Well, I think we're related, which he didn't admit to me. But when I checked his Instagram, because he told me to follow him, I noticed that he mentioned one of his ancestors. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm distantly related to that guy too, which means that we're distantly related. But long story short, he's actually from the same place my dad is, which is totally weird. But again, it makes sense because when Spanish and Portuguese came to America, they went to Nuevo Reino de Leon, which was, you know, the kingdom, the new kingdom of the lion. And then there was also New España was another part of it, right? Well, my family came and settled in Nuevo Leon and formed Monterrey. And Monterrey was formed as a Jewish city, basically, but like in secret. Like nobody really knew it was, but it's a very Jewish city even to this day. In fact, we said, or someone in chat said they were from Mexico, Mexico, to pronounce it with the pronunciation correct. They probably know what I'm talking about Monterrey, being very Jewish. And so when I heard about Monterrey being very Jewish, I was like, wait a minute. Jewish? Why would Monterey be Jewish? Where would they have came from? And of course I started looking into it, and I'm like, most if not all of my family is from Monterey. Pretty much all of my Hispanic family is from Monterey. They're from Nuevo Leon. And so Nuevo Leon is also on the border. So, which is Laredo, Nuevo Leon, Laredo. Laredo, Texas, which is also on the border. So yeah, Monterey has a lot of Jewish people, for sure. In fact, they have festivals there, and even like Pan de Dulce is really big in Monterey specific, but in Nuevo Leon especially. At least according to when I've talked to other Mexicans from other regions, they tell me that Pan de Dulce isn't as big in their region, and I always thought that that's so interesting because it's literally like I couldn't go a week without having it, without having my candied bread or my raisin bread or any of my fruit breads. We ate that like religiously because guess what? It was a religious thing that they changed into something else because they wanted to keep that same tradition. So Jewish people historically actually eat the same kind of bread, right? And you can look this up, by the way, if you guys are curious. And so I asked my dad about this bread and the name in Spanish, and I can't remember the name now, but I asked him in Spanish. I said, "Do you remember this bread?" And he looked at me and was like, "Of course, like that. Everyone has that bread." You know? And the name was I keep thinking pan de bono, but pan de bono's fucking Colombian. It's what my girlfriend likes a lot, and I like it too, but it was pan de something. Anyway, it's a raisin bread it's a bread that has raisins in it, basically. And that kind of bread with the flakes and the raisins is uniquely Middle Eastern / you know, Persian / Babylonian, maybe, aka Jewish. So that's kind of how there's so much similarities in the cultures. In fact, somebody in chat said they're from the Canary Islands. They could probably back me up on this, but wouldn't you agree that the Canary Islands are more Latin than Spain? And there's a reason for that. It's because the Canary Islands had the Guancho people, who apparently my ancestor was supposed to be like a Guancho native king or something like that. That was Spanish as well. He was supposed to be both. Anyway, the Guancho were in the Canary Islands. And they're kind of like the indigenous people of Mexico, a darker skinned, kind of more native people. So that's why that area seems more maybe like Latin, if you will, because it has more of that like vibe, you know? So the world is very confusing, right? And especially because who the hell knows about Spain's little islands off of the coast of Africa even? I bet you not many people know. I'll look up the name, Pleo, because I'm trying to remember. Pan dulce is just straight, you know, candied bread. But was it dead bread? No, dead bread is, I'm thinking, that's muerte. That's like Day of the Dead bread. No, it's what is the damn name? It's so they do sourdough. I know that Jewish people do a sourdough bread, but I'm trying to remember what's the name. Okay, so actually I found it here. It's called, let's see. So apparently in Mexico you can get babka, challah, as well as, where is it? Like I know babka, obviously. It's pretty normal. But I'm trying to look for something else. My history teacher said we were more African than white. It was a really weird teacher. Huh. They said that y'all were African in the Canary Islands? I mean, obviously y'all would be rather African, but I think the problem with that statement is that it's very reductive, because the Guancho people, just like the Aztec people, sort of intermingled, but also were eradicated and died from sicknesses and stuff like that. So a very common misconception, and I think you're picking up on it now, actually, Destoper. A common misconception is that a lot of Mexicans are native. That's actually not really true. And I think people have a hard time understanding that. Like, definitely a lot of Africans in the Canary Islands. I'm not going to debate that, Simon. Definitely that. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. A lot of people think that in that case, you can say, yeah, well, it's close to Africa, so it makes sense for them to go there. Fair enough. But here's where it's interesting. People think that all of the Mexicans in Mexico are from native people. But that's just not true. It's literally not true. Like, it's a common misconception that the Spanish came over and just basically had a bunch of sex with a bunch of natives, and that's how they created the Mexicans. That's almost like a myth, really. Because it's kind of what happened, but it's not really what happened. And the reason being is, for example, there's actual records of who founded the city of Monterrey. The city that my family founded. And in the records, there wasn't that many people there who didn't already have partners. There was only a couple of single people there. And so of the single people there, they, according to the records, married some of the other people that came along as well, the children of the other families. And so that's usually what happens when you go and colonize somewhere, is the families from these different areas and stuff that went to travel to colonize kind of mingle together. And so it's actually a really good argument in Monterrey that there actually isn't that many native people. In fact, the records only show that one Moreno was in the actual colony, meaning like one like native tribesman guy was there. So maybe in other towns and other regions of Mexico, they were mainly populated by indigenous people. My great-grandpa was literally Aztec Mexican. Like, I'll show y'all a picture of him sometime. Like, he was like so dark that not Aztec Mexican, Aztec in general. He was so dark that he literally looks like he's black, but he's not. He's literally just Native American. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's just a native of Mexico. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of white people in North Mexico. That's why. It's because they're more so Spanish. So Monterrey as a town and Nuevo León as a region largely is founded by Spanish and Jewish people. Now, Nuevo León more towards the border, as you probably remember it or know of it. That's where my family's from, which is very poor and very horrible place to live. And I'm sorry. I don't really recommend you guys going to Laredo, Laredo. I do not. I really don't. It's very scary. My family literally fled from that area. So, yeah, in fact, my family's from Laredo in Texas. They literally had to leave because one of my family members was killed by a lot of corrupt police officers. So, needless to say, yeah, it wasn't a place that my family could stay there anymore. But part of the reason for that was because my great-grandma's family disowned her because she married a native, basically. Because he was like Aztec blood and he didn't have any family history or any like land. Whenever my great-grandma, Juana Cantu, also went by Juanita, whenever she married him, her family was like, nah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm a Cantu as well, Pleo, if you're wondering. I'm a by blood, Moreno, Cantu. Those are the two biggest names, Mexican names that I have in my family. And then the most Spanish names / Mexican names, because they used to be Spanish names more so that became Mexican names, is De la Garza, which became Garza, and Trevino, which I'm pretty sure is still Trevino. It used to be Argon de Trevino, I think. Or was something Trevino. But I think it eventually... No, Trevino was a second last name. So I think it was De la Garza Trevino was my old ancestry name. De la Garza Trevino. and my blood name is Moreno, but my actual last name, which is weird because my dad's stepdad gave it to him basically. So I have some random name now that I'm gonna change, but it's Gonzalez. So yeah, pretty interesting. I couldn't really find the name of that bread. I'm trying to find it. I know babka is definitely like Mexican. You can find it all over Mexico, babka. But it's something else that I cannot remember what it's called, but I'll have to go look it up. Yes, Bensamita. Yes, that's it. Yes. It was even like, it was Day of the Lord bread. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, for religious ceremony bread. And that's why I would always eat it on Saturday, not Sunday. Isn't that weird? That my family would feed me the bread on Saturday, but not Sunday? Even though my family was Baptist Catholic and shit. Like, it was to kind of tell you that, yeah, there's some old relics in the past that are stuck there somewhere. Like, I'm guessing they look as dark-skinned as a fair bit of South Americans do. Yeah, I'll show you guys if you're curious, because y'all see me and I'm pretty fair-skinned. I'll show y'all a picture of my grandma. And I probably won't be able to find a picture of my great-grandpa, but I'll try. But I think you'll see that, yeah, I look a little bit more native once you see my family and by comparison. The same thing happened to mine as well, almost human. An unfortunate part of being a dark Hispanic is you get extra racism because you get other Hispanics racist against you because you're dark skinned, and then you get the normal amount of racism. So I'm lucky, obviously. Not that the people who don't are necessarily unlucky, but I'm lucky that obviously I'm pretty damn white. So if I ever want to just say I'm white and just hide my identity, I could if I wanted to, which is a privilege. Like, definitely a privilege. All right, I'm trying to. See, I can't find any damn pictures of my old, my great grandpa. But I found one of my grandma. Let's see. All right, here we go. Look, see, there's my dad, and then there's my grandma. And my dad looks European because he is. He's half European, actually, and half Mexican. So my dad is like Austrian. I thought we were Czech, but it turns out we're actually Austrian. We were fleeing at the time, so hard to know what you are at that time, right? Yeah, so Austrian Mexican, which is such a weird mix because I'm like 25% Austrian, 25% Mexican, and then my grandma was full. She has blood from her dad, which is a mestizo, native Aztec, and then her mom, Juana, was her family was from Spain, who fled here originally. Someone had a good question in chat though. Michael Snow said, "How does your kinship history shape your indigeneity? Indigeneity? Am I saying that right? I can't quite tell. Or did you miss it? Because I see you said identity, but you probably meant identity. I know what you're trying to say, so I don't care if I have to pronounce it exactly correctly. But anyway, so the question of how does it affect my identity, like my kinship, a history shape my. So I think I kind of understand what you're saying. Maybe you could word it in a different way, but I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying kind of like how my family was colonizers and I have natives in my family. Like, that's a bit interesting. Is that kind of what you're saying? Because it's true. Like, I do have, unfortunately, not just colonizers, guys. I have conquerors in my family. Like, I can literally see their names. Capitan Los Banderos de las Casas. Diego de la Montemayor. Like, you know these names, Plio. These are pretty big conqueror names and people who founded cities in Mexico. So yeah, it is a bit weird. Like, I'm happy and proud of my history, and then I'm also like weirdly like on the fence about it all because I do have native blood, which is really weird how close I was to my native side. And then I find out about this whole other colonization side, and it's like, yeah, how does it shape my identity, I guess? Well, I can't exactly tell people I'm just a Spaniard, you know? Like, I can't just tell people, oh, I'm just Spanish. Because that's what I used to do. Like, growing up, I would just tell people all the time, I'm Spanish. Because it was annoying telling people I was Mexican. Like, to me, it wasn't worth the effort having to explain to somebody that I'm Mexican. So I would just tell them, oh, I'm Spanish. And they would just be like, oh, okay. Makes sense. And, I mean, to be fair, I'm way more Spanish than I am Mexican. Because my family wasn't in Mexico for very long. At least the family that I, can track and know of. But, like, yeah, no, they definitely hit me with that a lot. Like, are you really Mexican? And so I just started saying, oh, I'm Spanish. I'm Spanish. I'm Spanish. So it did affect my identity in the sense that I did almost like have a crisis of my own identity. I didn't think I actually was who I was. I look at my grandpa and he was dark. Like y'all saw my grandma. There she has makeup on. She's darker than that. And my grandpa is even darker than her. I would say he's like 2 shades darker than her. So like I grew up around people like that. So yeah, it was almost like I couldn't see myself in the mirror, I guess, if you want to put it that way, without getting all weird about race and color, because I don't care about that stuff as much. Obviously, I care about protecting it, but I don't care about it as much in the sense that I'm not, like, so focused on it. But yeah, it was almost like I just couldn't see myself in the mirror as being so white, to put bluntly. I didn't see myself that way. I saw myself as a Hispanic. And growing up on the border, a lot of my childhood, it felt that way. I felt like I was just an Hispanic kid. But clearly I was always different and fair-skinned and stuff. And so, yeah, I guess it's now 2020. How does it affect me? I'm a lot more like comfortable with myself as a person, and I'm also a lot more capable of just defending my perspective as a person. So I can just say I am who I am. I'm Jewish. Like, if that offends people, like that I have Jewish ancestry, got Jewish blood, then whatever, that offends people. If it offends people that I'm Spanish and I colonized my own people as well, which is, you don't think, like, I think that's fucking weird? Of course that's weird. So it's like, history is weird like that, especially when you're not the one doing this shit, right? It's not like I was like, hey, let's go, like, found Monterey and then, like, run away from the military whenever they try to come track us down, which is kind of what one of my ancestors did. Speaking of which, the whole idea that people have of Spanish conquistadors and colonizers just going around and just basically just like conquering everything under the name of Spanish law and the crown is also false. And I think that that's another thing that the Spaniard in me has to defend a little bit, which is like, you guys have heard about Spaniards and how we've done a lot of colonizing, to put it nicely, right? Just like the British. But the thing is that in the case of the worst offenders, for example, Columbus, Cortez, Montemayor, Carvajal, many of these great conquerors / like people who were known for getting territory and almost going off rogue on their own, who had bad reputations, were rogue. They went rogue. Like, that doesn't get talked about ever in history. It's kind of annoying because, like, in hindsight, I was like, they kind of just made my people seem like they were very evil people, when it's more that the people that were sent were kind of the evil people. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were like, whoa, opportunity here. Let's not listen to any laws. Because multiple of those people were literally tracked down and killed by the Spanish themselves. So it's not like they were agreeing with them, right? They weren't all, like, evil. Just some of them. Is there such a thing as triple racism? I haven't experienced it. I thought you were from Australia or New Zealand at first. I could see that because I have Scottish ancestry from my American, side, I guess if you want to call it that. They're primarily Norwegian and Scottish. So basically my mom's side is all Scottish Norwegian, like blood primarily. And then my dad is Austrian, Mexican / Spanish. So simply put, I tell people that I'm racially Hispanic, right? Racially, I'm European / Austrian, if you want to call it that. And then culturally, and nationally I am American, and what else am I missing? And my ancestry is Scottish Norwegian. So yeah, it's like I think the hard thing about talking about family history is that all of those things are different. Like culture is not the same as your ancestry, and your ancestry isn't the same as your race, quote unquote, right? So like if you're like Hispanic or Anglo or something like that, you're like white. That's not the same as being Danish necessarily, right? Like someone could be Danish and actually not be white. Surprise, right? But like anyway, the point being is they're not the same things, and neither is the culture the same. I'm sure, for example, people were born in Denmark but came to another country later on, for example, and maybe lost their culture. So maybe they're still considered a Dane, but maybe a Danish person would say, "Are you really a Dane? Because you're not culturally Danish." You know, and I think that all of those are they're like three different arguments. But I think that they're typically related, obviously. Somebody that's culturally something is probably going to be racially something that's probably going to be have an ancestry that leads from this place. You know what I'm saying? So like you can usually connect all three together. But if you're a weirdo like me, then it's like not even connected at all. Like you're like all over the place. Like you're like culturally Mexican American, but then you're like Spanish more so and shit. And like you're more European than you are American. But like America is all you've lived your whole life. But most of your family's not even from America. Yeah, it's weird how Americans are. We're weird. We have a weird, interesting history. Oh no, I lost all my Proud Boy viewers. Yeah, I know. Like, once they found out I'm Jewish, now I'm gonna get that insult, I'm sure, at some point. But I got ahead of it. I went ahead and told everybody I was Jewish, so people didn't, like, figure out I was Jewish and then, like, try to use it as, like, some, like, you kept it a secret the whole time or some weird shit. I'm like, yeah, you guys got me, I guess. I got ahead of it. The Spanish were probably the worst. I can't deny that, Limpos. Like, I love the culture, and I love, obviously, the fact that I'm alive, which I owe that to the colonizers and the people who fled Spain and Portugal. But at the same time, I also have to admit that they did a lot of fucked up shit, and they got into a lot of wars, they ruined a lot of people's land, and yeah, but that was in the past, right? Right, this is in the past. Just kidding. From my perspective, the other Europeans were evil. Yeah, like, yeah, from my perspective, the Portuguese were evil. They were a rival family to the Spanish. No, I'm just kidding. No, I actually thought about that before. I was like, who do I blame more? The Spanish for kicking out my family originally, or the Portuguese people for letting the Spanish kick them out? Like I was thinking about that one day. I was like, most of my family's Spanish, so I'm not gonna blame the, Portugal for that. But I'm like, to be fair, y'all